Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 184. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge on the comic forums, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim. My stomach was hurting. I had a great fear that I wasn't alone and Genesis was hiding in here. The situation is worse than I thought it could be. I think it's really Sheriff Root's son hiding in me. I tried the word all day in hopes it would work. It came out a bunch of nonsense. I didn't get that perk. Oh well, I am fine for our 12-issue feature. Sean and I will be sitting down to review the comic Preacher. So says the Sensei of the Whatnot and the Duke of Segulin.
Oh, good. How's it going, eh?
This has been a long time in coming. I'm excited for this one. Preacher.
I know.
This has been one I've honestly wanted to do since we started podcasting the show. And after almost 4 years, we're finally getting to it. But this is going to be a multi-part feature where we're going to dissect the first 12 issues of Preacher, which was contained in the book 1 hardcover. So for those of you who've been waiting for this, it's here!
Dun, dun, dun.
We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. Jim, now you can also hear us on Get Your Geek on Radio. Actually, 183 was the first episode. That's an internet radio website where you can now be streaming us at work. And it's awesome. So we're
Sweet.
It's getyourgeekonradio.com, an online radio station committed to making geek chick. So very cool. I want to remind everyone about the Hero Initiative, heroinitiative.org for more information, and there's a handy-dandy link on ragingbullets.com. You can click on that and support the Hero Initiative. Our sponsors for this episode are dcbservice.com and instocktrades.com. Jim, the new books are up at dcbservice.com. I saw a deal right away that I'm jumping on. The Losers, Volume 1 and Volume 2 in trade paperback. I don't know if you have any of this. It's Andy Diggle and Jock. I really like Andy Diggle's writing. Ooh. This is the first 12 issues of the series. Volume 1 and 2 are being released regularly $19.99 to get them together. It's only $9.99. So for 12 issues for $9.99...
Wow.
I'm jumping on that.
Yeah, that's huge.
It's Vertigo. It's in the Vertigo section.
Yeah.
So if you didn't pick up The Losers and you have any interest at all, you get those first 2 trades for like $5 each.
Nice.
Yeah, I love those deals. So I'm on board for that one. Thank you, DCBService.com, for providing that deal. And over at InStockTrades.com, because we are actually picking our next winner midway through this episode. Jim, we've got Preacher, Dead or Alive, the collected covers. They have it in both hardcover, which is regularly $29.95. They have it for $18.87. Or you can get it in softcover, regularly $19.95, only $12.57. So you've got 2 different ways that you can pick up that. But it's the collected covers with the commentary by Garth Ennis and Glenn Fabry. So if you like the covers of Preacher, which are gorgeous, it's all the covers in one book. I'm getting the hardcover.
Yeah.
I don't have that one now. I have the Fables one, and I'm a big fan of that. Did you ever get the 52 collected covers?
Yes, I did get the 52.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, I like those cover books, but to me, the commentary is what's so interesting to read them and
it's
have
kind
the
of a neat
commentary.
stuff.
So I'm going to pick up both of those, but that's at InStockTrades.com, and you can get those deals over there, so that's great. Check out RagingBullets.com with listener-produced columns, Where's What Not Nows, DC release dates, show news, and more. I even have a column up there. But I want to thank everyone for participating. If you ever have content for the website, we have an ongoing contest where we're going to pick a winner on this episode midway through, who's going to decide on the next Rage of the Month that we're going to be doing. You can send that to ragingcontest@gmail.com. We're always looking for entries and Where's What Not Nows and columns and anything you want to blog or whatever on the website. We love your voicemails. Send them to 1-440-388-4434 or drnorge on Skype. And Jim, what kind of a podcast are we? Because we're going to be diving into Preacher.
Well, Sean, we are a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plot lines, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're reviewing on the show. So if you're going over something you haven't read, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
And I also want to let people know Preacher is a mature reader's book.
Big time.
There's going to be things we're going to be discussing on this one that you definitely want to listen to this episode before you have the kids listen to it. So
yeah.
It's a fun one. But without further ado, let's jump right into Preacher.
Nice work, Atom. What are these characters up to?
Jim, our next review is going to be Preacher, Volume 1, or book one, I should say, hardcover, which was written by Garth Ennis. The artist is Steve Dillon, Matt Hollingsworth on colors, Clem Robbins on letters, Julie Rottenberg as the assistant editor, and Stuart Moore is the editor. And Jim, this is one, I have been wanting to do this, as I mentioned at the start of this episode, since we started doing this show. This is one of those books that's like Starman was to me. When this book came out, I remember I saw the preview solicitation for it, and I remember seeing the cover and hearing the concept, and I was like, okay, I kind of want to check this one out. This was, Sandman was running during this time, and I was looking for like another Vertigo book to follow as kind of a monthly read. I read this in single issue monthlies as it was coming out. It was just, I remember seeing the first cover of it and just being completely blown away. How was this for you? Because you experienced this completely collected. Now, did you read this before we got the hardcover?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this was... I was reading The Boys, and everyone kept saying how The Boys is going to out Preacher. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, okay, what is... and then you talked about Preacher. I'm like, let me pick up the trade on it. So I literally bought the first trade, flew through it, bought the second trade, flew through that, and then when the hardcover came, like, I'll just get these now in hardcover. So... yeah, this is the way I've... my introduction is in the pure trade format. This is one where I'm not... For about half a second, I thought about going and getting the individual episodes, the individual issues, and I decided, no, I'm just going to keep getting this in trade. And I would have had all of the the softcover trades if they hadn't done the hardcover. So I'm going to go with the hards now.
Not only do I have the single issues,
I have
the trades
and
now I have the hardcover. But that tells you just how much I love this series.
Yeah,
because it's one of those I really wanted and I bought the trades with the idea that I would sell my singles, which I have not done as of yet.
Yeah.
So that worked out really, really well. But I bought them because I'm thinking, this is a series that I'm going to want to read over and over again. And honestly, I wasn't going to buy the hardcover. I was thinking, do I need to own this again? And apparently I do.
Yeah.
Because this was my idea.
I love the hardcovers. I really do. When we're going through and we see the stuff being offered, it's hard for me to pass up on a hardcover just because it's just, I put it up on the shelf. It's a nice thing. If I ever do sell, for some of my trades, I have it there. It's just, I like going to this.
In all honesty, if I can get this whole thing in hardcovers, this will be my preferred format.
Yeah.
Because I love the glossy pages. I love this feels substantial. The paper quality on this in itself is just, it's really, really a nice package. So for me, this is my preference as far as what I'm going to keep. I'm holding on to everything, though, just in case. I can't imagine them not collecting this all the way through, though.
Yeah, they got to do that.
Yeah. Because this one I want all in hardcovers. I will actually rebuy this one. Well, you know what it is? It's being able to do the online buying that ends up working for me. This story, it was funny. When I reread this, it had been a long, long time since I'd read this series. And it kicks off with them in the 5 Acres Diner. And I didn't remember the book starting that way, because so much of this issue is devoted to then jumping into the backstory of how they wound up together, that was what I remembered. And this is such a great way to start it, because these relationships with these three, Jesse, Tulip, and Cassidy, is so pivotal to this story. And it's funny, we talk about how this series is irreverent and how it's for mature readers and all that, but where this gets into really very cool character development is there's a great love story with Tulip and Jesse that goes through the entire series. And it's well worth following for that, because it's extremely well developed. Even the stuff that's in the first 12 issues is only the kickoff of where this story goes with the two of them, which is great because it's very substantial, very cool story. And Cassidy's one of those guys where you totally understand why Jesse's friends with him. It's told throughout, especially in this first volume, you can start seeing what it is that draws these two together, and that there is a good side to Cassidy, but he's also, again, he's one of those friends that you can see, like, he's kind of hard to bring around the wife, he's hard to bring around the girlfriend, because he constantly shakes things up. He's got issues.
Yeah. Well, it's funny with me and Preacher. Whenever there's ever anything that has, whether it's a comic, a movie, TV show that has, a religious type connotation or religious discussion or things that's in direct contradiction to what I believe, I do initially have that reaction of it as an attack on my faith. And I want to fight back. But I'm smart enough and I have enough logical mind to see that this isn't just about, oh, let me be shocking. Let me, be down on the church and down on faith. This is an actual story. It's a well-crafted story. That it just happens that this is the backdrop and part of the condition, the considerations and whatnot of the characters. So I can sit there and I can look at this logically. So for me, Preacher is really a contradiction between my faith and logic, which is a constant theme in the book itself. So I'm getting myself kind of into the book where I have some of the same, tugs and, some of the same, crisis of conscience, crisis of faith that they're going through. And then you see a guy like Cassidy who I could hang with in a heartbeat, and he's got that same little sick, twisted, juvenile humor that we have, that I'm like, oh, and it pulls me right in. So this is just one of those great stories that if on the surface you just read just the friendship aspect of this, it's a great story. But you add all these other extra, just these cool story elements into it, and I'm just like, I'm pulled in.
It's what is faith, what is morality, what is right, what is wrong. Does wearing robes and wearing vestments and having on the collar make you the person? Does that make you instantly a good person, or is it other things? And they turn this completely. They're willing to take a look at the fact that there are people who put on those vestments and they have no business wearing them. And I'm not just talking about Jesse. This when it kicks into the whole Grail stuff later on in the series, it keeps going and going and going, and it's one of those things. But they aren't afraid to attack anything. The angels they go after, and it does. It can be out and out irreverent. I can see where people could quickly get offended. But you're right. Once you sit down and actually read what's going on here, there is a great character drama unfolding here, where you can really see by the end, and it is something I encourage everybody. Alamo is the last trade paperback, which actually collects the whole series. There were specials and one-shots that have been collected in trade, including Saint of Killers, and the story of You-Know-Who, which is Sheriff Roof's son. Then there's all kinds of people that have one-shots and specials in this one. And there's another one, and it's currently escaping me. But it was a series, I remember when I was reading it all the way through, it was so worth following because of all these crazy characters that appeared out of nowhere. Yet, by the end of it, you're rallying behind Jesse and what he stands for. You don't always agree with him. He's a guy that I can sit there and look at him and go, okay, I just out and out don't agree with him there, but I like him.
Yeah.
Which is that makes him very human and very real. I like that reality in comics at times, where you can read a character and go, I blatantly think he's wrong here, but yet I like him, and I like that humanity. I like the character flaws that we see in him, and that's where our main characters are the most important. The book gets irreverent with people that aren't main characters, but our three main characters, there's real down-to-earth reality to them of character development, where they stay pretty grounded throughout the whole series. The wild stuff goes on around them, and they react to it, but they're grounded, which is interesting. Yeah. The relationship with Tulip is something that's very interesting, too, because that's about him manning up, which I really like. Where he's got to sit there and make a decision. Could you give up the one you love? And that's a question that we're going to see he had to face and how he had to answer it. And that's funny throughout this, and I really liked that aspect. But we see the two of them sitting out in the diner, and it's clear at this point we're put in the middle of a situation that has already occurred. They've been through a whole big mess at this point in time, and they're trying to regroup and make a plan for where do we go from here together. And it's clear that Tulip is upset with Jesse because Jesse ran out on her, at least in her mind. She's keeping secrets. Cassidy has his own secrets, and you wonder how this group of people are together at all.
I tell you, I loved just opening up in the Greasy Spoon Diner. It had the Reservoir Dogs kind of feel to it. And also you think about it with the serious, mega, major, holy S they had been through at this point in time in the story. It makes sense that you just sit down and say, okay, we need to regroup, and just lay all the cards on the table. And that's part of what this whole thing is. They're sitting there explaining where they came from. They don't go into all of the details. They leave some stuff stuff out, but they start saying exactly what's going on, where are we at, what do we got to deal with here. And I like just that idea and that concept of a starting point. A lot of times I'm not too big on the flashback of storytelling, but for me, this one worked, especially once I saw what they went through. It kind of fit, and it just opened up the story and let us get into it.
One thing I like about Jesse, and this opening segment is very telling when it comes to him. Because even though it's clear he's made mistakes in his life, he does have a code. And he was raised with a certain kind of upbringing when it comes to responsibility. Like he talks about, that's going to have to stay my business for the time being. But he says, look, I didn't have a great deal of choice in the matter. I believed in God Almighty, but I figured that was the beginning of the end of it. I didn't know I was going to end up responsible for the spiritual guidance of the whole Texas town. Now, that's interesting when you see this because it's clear he's a preacher, but never really wanted to go down that path. What forced him down that path? Interesting way to start this out. But yet, he still, even though he was pushed into this for whatever reason, forced into this for whatever reason, he still feels a responsibility for them. And that is very telling for the character. He makes huge mistakes along the way, but then does a lot of good and a lot of right by standing up for his mistakes and also trying to stand up for what he believes he is right, whether he's right or wrong.
Yeah, it's that moral conflict, that moral code he has. He definitely has his code. He knows what is right and wrong. And throughout all of this, he does some stuff that, and you said earlier, how he does some stuff that you flat out think is wrong, and he'll come up and admit, say, hey, my bad on that. And he'll try to make good for what his mistakes he did. And it's just, I like the fact that, throughout this, throughout just this volume, you see these times when he'll well, we'll get to it. There's a couple of stuff he does that it's like, what you doing, dude? You messed up. And he has insecurities there because of that, though. That's what I like about him, too. On the exterior, when you see him, you see a lot of confidence, a lot of, there's no other way to say it. He's badass. Yeah. But, I mean, he's got the strut going, man. Yeah. He definitely has the strut.
And I mean, I like that aspect of him, but there's more to it. And he's a very layered character, which is interesting. Well, all this kicks into a flashback to his time as a preacher, which is actually the title of this issue, The Time of the Preacher, where we see the first signs of his crisis of faith. We see him back in Annville, which winds up being a landmark of sorts in the series.
Significant event happens.
Yeah. But he goes into this bar. And when he's in there, it's clear that he is so upset at this point that before he even started drinking, he is starting to reveal things about people that probably should have been best kept in the confessional.
Yeah. There's that whole, confidentiality thing that's supposed to happen, and he kind of basically is throwing that out the window.
Yeah, he goes here, good old Reverend Custer, sitting in his church to be laughed at on Sundays. I overhear it, or someone tells me in the strictest confidence, or I just read the paper and put two and two together. Stuff everybody knows and thinks nobody knows, least of all, the preacher. And basically, that he's got this, he knows that the people don't view him very highly, that they think that he's a little dumber than them, which that's kind of an ongoing theme of this series, too, where you'll see people using other people to make themselves, which it is funny how real that is in society, where people will put down other people to make themselves look like more than they actually are. But then you find out that they think that they're lower even than the person they were putting down to begin with. And there's a lot of that throughout this. But he goes a little too far. Because he's talking about the fact that, like the movie Kate shot in your barn. And, we get these clear ideas that, they shot kind of...
Kate had a co-star that had 4 legs, so... But I love just that flow through as he's going through. He starts off with the bartender just ripping on about the watered down beer. Then he goes from the one, on and just keeps... It was just that nice, he kept going along with it. And we talked about just that strut and that swagger. You could see it right there. And there were a couple where he goes too far. Like the whole Kate thing, I think he shouldn't have gone there because, she made some choices, probably not the best ones in the world, but that one, I'm like, come on, dude. Did you really need to cut her down on that?
Well, I don't think it was so much her, though, that he was trying to use that on Harv. Because, Harv was making it seem like, could feed half of Rwanda on the grants you get from that farm. And, he starts hitting him with that. And when that's not enough to rattle him, he then brings in Kate as a way to further dispel who he is and his character.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't think that was so much to nail Kate as much as to get on Harv. And the fact that Harv is not this great upstanding citizen of Anvil.
Yeah, he's ripping off the government, basically.
But what it went too far is, if there's two guys that are going to commit and cover up a violent crime, you don't want to be revealing that in a bar.
Well, actually, I really liked that one. That was the one where I really thought that was a good thing, and I loved how it ended, too.
And I liked why he did it, because he morally thought what they did was wrong.
He's calling him out on it.
And was really sticking it to him and saying, you people all know it. Because he wasn't just telling them. He was ripping on the whole bar, basically saying, you guys... So, at this point, he had reached his breaking point because he was aware that his clergy... these people...
They knew about it. They accepted the payola.
His parishioners, I should say. He's a clergy.
Yeah.
His parishioners basically knew all of this, and it was all a big cover-up. How do you, as a priest, when you're supposed to be trying to raise the sense of morality, all of a sudden realize that the place you are in is so morally corrupt, and that the people don't seem to care? They think he's a joke for what he's trying to do there. And this is the point where he's at his breaking point right now. In something a calling that was never really meant to be his.
It wasn't a calling he had the passion for.
Right.
And that's the hard thing about, with any of these religious, callings, whether it's, Sean and I probably are going to constantly say priest when we mean preacher, just because we are raised Catholic. And when we think a religious doctrine, we think priest, we think nuns. It's just naturally ingrained into us. Sean has the scars to prove it. He went to Catholic school. We've had this beaten into us. So, but it's very similar to any other religious callings. If you have that position where you're looked at, whether it's, it's a rabbi, whether it's a preacher, whether it's minister, whatever term you're going to throw out there for your holy man, for your guider, your teacher, you're just that leader of your faith. It's a very difficult calling. And Jesse's got this where we see later how he got into this, which is a wonderful story and a great way this volume wraps up. We see finally get the backstory behind Jesse, that he didn't want this. And this is something that you have this weight of this world. You have all this, extra pressure that you shouldn't have. He has lumped on him. And seeing him just lash out like this was a wonderful thing. And I love just the little hidden jabs. Because you talked about how he used Kate as an extra jab to Harley. I like the extra little jab he did to the judge, who took who basically took the bribe to cover up and allow that to go through. Another nice little jab. That was just some great stuff. But it had a very realistic ending in that those two brothers cracked him in the head with the pool cue. And I liked how the way the art team worked that, because as he's talking, you see the one reach behind his back. He ain't, adjusting his pants there. He's reaching for either a gun or a knife. My guess is probably a gun kept in the small of his back. So they were getting ready to drop him, and he probably would have shot him right then there in the bar in front of everybody, figuring they could pay their way through it, because it seemed like they were from the rich family in this town. So I like just that little subtle stuff. And as I'm reading this, I'm seeing this, I kind of seeing the back alley deals that happened, and it just, everything that they barely just implied, I started seeing these story arcs. And that's something that, right then from the opening, this pulled me in.
As I was reading this bit too, Leonard saves him, the bar owner saves him. And Jesse talks about that he wasn't so bad, because he watered down his beer, and that was the big contention there. But you know what? You got to, even in this question, was Leonard really saving him as a way of being selfless, or that he did not want that label on his establishment?
Oh, definitely did not want be known as the bar where the preacher was shot.
Right. Now, I like how we're taking this through because we're going through a little bit of Jesse's early history leading up to what happened with Genesis, which we see at heaven. And Jesse's, at this point, been able to kind of reconstruct what happened in heaven, how Genesis broke out. And we don't really know at this stage what Genesis is, but we know that Genesis is broken out of this prison in heaven. It's interesting, the humanity of the angels, because it didn't dawn on me until I started really kind of going through this the first time. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're talking about angels here. And
yeah, I did. When I mentioned earlier about conflict and stuff like this, was one of the first parts that were really a kind of moment to me, because you see in my head you got these notions of what heaven is. Heaven is perfection. It's this great and wonderful existence that human words really can't even accurately describe. And it's pure love. It's that wonderful, warm, loving affection that you feel in your heart, that you have. It's that poets spend lifetimes to try to describe accurately. That to me is what heaven is. This definitely is not heaven. This is a very human heaven where not only, we start getting indications that something is amiss in heaven. It's, there's already even, rumblings and rumors as to who is actually running heaven. What's going on? These are angels covering up something, wanting to, we have the Adelphi angels who are covering for the seraphim. It's, we don't want them to know, Genesis is escaped. And it's this whole of human emotion and just deceit and deception going on in
Heaven's
heaven.
Emerald City.
Yeah.
In The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Don't look behind. No, I'm serious. Don't look behind the curtain, because there is this outward projection of what we're used to seeing from heaven, but we're seeing that the reality of heaven is very human and very flawed. They have the same flaws that people would have on earth. So we're seeing angels here that have distinct character flaws, distinct moral flaws, which makes you wonder. So really, this book in its own way is putting into question the concept of heaven, how we view it. What is heaven? What is hell?
What is it?
Does it? And it is interesting that it's such a human side is put on this, with the blank and all these guys that were supposed to be the guardians of Genesis. This being that has now escaped. And of course we see these these tough, and I'm trying to remember
the seraphim.
The seraphi.
Seraphim.
Yeah. The seraphi come on, and one of the seraphi's head has been torn off. So this Genesis is enough to easily take out an angel without even batting an eye.
Yeah,
because there was no battle here.
Yeah, this was an instant boom. And one thing I do like is that they do have the different class of angels. Mm-hmm. Almost every religion out there that has a concept of angels and guardians have these different levels. And quickly seeing, the seraphi is just like the seraphim, currently in the Catholic, the archangel type, the warrior style. You look at them, they look, nasty. They look tough. When they're dealing with the Adelphi, it's, you could see those are the scientists, kind of like the thinkers, the scholarly type angels, so the heralds, the voice of God type things. But I like seeing these different classes, and the way they are drawn, you can immediately see which ones were the warriors, which ones were the worker class, which ones were this. And as they're discussing this, that was something I really liked seeing.
I like this idea that the hatred of the concept of Genesis. What would Genesis have turned out like if they hadn't treated him so bad, or treated the entity? I don't even know if it's safe to call him a him at this point, but if they hadn't treated the entity so bad and locked up the entity, what did Genesis have turned out like if they had embraced Genesis and brought him in? Because a lot of this was, they automatically decided that this was because Genesis was crossbred. And might as well just say it, between an angel and a demon, because that is something we're going to get to in the story. But it is referenced here by the seraphi that Genesis is a crossbreed, and that's something that just is just the disgust on the face of the angel, saying that it's not, this should be a pure angel. If there was so the idea that angels can reproduce.
Yeah, that's another interesting. That was something I was sitting there when they're talking about it, and then even later on when we go into it, that was another thing I really liked about this creation. When we get to the actual deeper explanation as to what Genesis is, that in itself, I was like, oh, that's kind of neat. It was another one of those slap in the face of my religious doctrines, but it was it was a cool story element that I was like, okay, this isn't. He's not trying to insult my beliefs. He's not trying to, put down any of the organized religions, Catholic Church or whatnot. So it was just this great concept of a story in the story that I really liked, and I like seeing this build up from this point. And then any other time that we go back to heaven and we see them discussing what is Genesis, and as it slowly played out, how Jesse learns what is Genesis. That was something that really, I enjoyed, and I appreciated just the writing and the creativity process behind it.
What's interesting here is there's this panic now, because they were the watchers, the keepers of this Genesis. Now that Genesis is out and can obviously rip through their best of their best without any hassle, they have to get creative. And DeBlanc has an idea saying, we've got to come up with someone who never fails and never stops. I've got a job for you, my friend. Go to Boot Hill and wake up the Saint of Killers. Now, I'm going to say again what I've said, that read more Preacher if you enjoyed this one. You're going to want to get the trade that collects the Saint of Killers miniseries. It collects the Saint of Killers miniseries and the specials that I mentioned as well, which are definitely well worth seeking out, all as a package anyway. It's a cool way to get it. But that miniseries tells you where the Saint of Killers came from, how he came to be.
Oh, I gotta see this.
The whole history. It's incredible. And it can be read, that Saint of Killers miniseries can be read like immediately following this. You can literally seek that one out and read that in a different order. Some of the specials, like the story of You-Know-Who and stuff like that, you're probably going to want to save till you're a little further along in the reading. But that particular miniseries is the origin of the Saint of Killers. And it's
nice.
One of my favorite characters.
Okay, yeah. That guy, when just the name of Saint of Killers, I was like, oh, this sounds like this is going to be a pretty cool guy. I'm thinking this is going to be one of those, oh my God type moments coming up from this guy. Just the name. If you got a name like Saint of Killers, you better be really good at what you do.
It is clear at this point, we go back to the diner, of course, and it's clear at this point that they're willing to open up, because we do see throughout these issues initially that Tulip doesn't want to tell anything. She wants to keep very private about how she wound up where she was at. But now we're getting the background story where we find out how she met Cassidy and what happened there. And she was going to do a hit. She was going to kill somebody. So we don't know how she got so low that this is something that it's clear from Jesse throughout these issues. And I love how we're dropped into this, but then we learn that morally this is really outside of Tulip's character code. So you get this idea that Jesse and Tulip were two very different people prior to all this.
Yeah, when they knew each other, they were not the same person. They were not. This is a shock to see them. And I really liked just this whole story, how they see her standing there and she's like, oh, okay, what, and it's that uncomfortableness. You could tell she wasn't a professional assassin. I'm sitting there thinking this, going, okay, is this a vengeance thing? What is this going on here? And I like the fact that they slowly played this out. It took a little while for us to get the full backstory, but just the human type reaction. She's not a natural killer. She's not this cold monster. So when she goes to shoot the one guy and misses and blows the other dude's jaw off.
Even before that, though, when you take a look at her in the build-up to him, that's him. That's really him. I've got to really do this. And you see the sweat rolling down the side of her face. Just a wonderful art piece there. When I'm looking, I'm just like, whoa. But then you can see internally that she's at that moment where they're insulting her, and she's using that to drive her to do it. You can see the rage build up on her face because, they're making innuendos at her and really just, being like heavily sexist to her.
They had it coming. You know what?
Oh, yeah.
I'll give them, this is one where I could understand her pulling the trigger.
She shot the guy's jaw off. But I love the look on his face because he's still alive.
Yeah.
And he's looking just in shock and awe. And the guy who was supposed to be hit's looking at it. You think that was supposed to be hit? Just matter-of-factly. I'm sitting in my car. If I'm in my car and I've got a guy on one side of me and a guy on the other side and that guy's jaw's hanging out, I'm not going to sit there matter-of-factly saying, you think that's going to be hit? I'm going to be like, drive,
yeah.
Get moving, don't stop. So it just goes to show you the character of the guy who's in there. And he's more concerned with, at this point, them catching her, not getting away, which was an interesting distinction there.
I took it as, because this is, it's obviously a mob guy.
Right.
He's, connected, made some nasty killer. And he could recognize that she wasn't a killer. You know, just her reaction to the shot, just the way, you know, if she was a true killer, she would have kept pulling that trigger, and she wouldn't have stopped until she would have, you know, until all of them were dead. The fact she fires the one shot, realizes what happens, and then goes to run away, they're like, okay, take her, get her, find out, get information from her. So that was something I really digged. Just it kind of fit that whole, you know, difference between a killer and a non-killer. A killer and someone who is trying to kill somebody, as opposed to someone who can, will, and, you know, is able to.
Cassidy's just cool. And it's a funny thing about, you get to learn more about Cassidy later, where you see that that's not as simple with Cassidy either. And there's moments where you're going to love Cassidy in this storyline if you follow it through, and there's moments where you're going to hate Cassidy. And then you're going to come back again and say, but it's Cassidy. And he's one of those guys that he's the friend that you have that you naturally apologize for, and you have reasons why you hang out with him, yet most people who don't know him can't understand why you would bother. He's that kind of guy.
Yeah.
And we see when Tulip goes up, she's trying to get away. She tries to seem formidable and steal his vehicle from him, and he's just like, I'm not getting out of this car. Go ahead and pull that trigger. And she doesn't she's not a killer. She, you know, shooting the guy's jaw took a ton out of her. So it's clear you can tell that she's not ready to do that. The bit where Cassidy gets shot in the head.
Yeah, and it doesn't even faze him. That was
Right.
something I read that I was like, whoa, what the heck? You know, the opening sequence in the diner, you could tell there was something just not right about him. Mm-hmm. I couldn't put my finger on it. And then I see him take a shot to the head and didn't even react to it. I was like, okay, this is something really freaky.
Did you know, like, with your history, I know you're a huge fan of vampire characters. Did you know at this point that he was a vampire?
I didn't know he was a vampire.
Okay, I didn't either.
And I was like, you know, because I was sitting there, I'm like, he's something supernatural. Mm-hmm. He's something freaky,
Right.
but I didn't think vampire.
Did you think he was good or bad at this point?
See, that was the other thing with him. I didn't know yet. That opening sequence, there was something different about him. There was a different vibe to him. I couldn't tell if, you know, he was one of the good guys, one of the bad guys, was one of those neutral type characters. I hadn't, you know, that was the draw for me for Cassie, was the fact that I couldn't put my finger on who he was. And then this sequence come around where you talk about how he was just like, she's like, give me the car. He's like, no. And he's like, you know, and then he's like, get in. It should be interesting. And it was just, he gave her the ride just because he figured it'd be kind of interesting to see, you know, these guys shooting at her. You know, it'll take away my boredom for a little while. And so for that type of sequence, I still was thinking, okay, is he just along because it's interesting, or is he along to do the right thing?
Another great use of the art, because the way he was shot, you could see that out of Tulip's eye, if she was just looking at him from the side,
she wouldn't see
have seen what happened. Because he had no reaction to it other than, oomph.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the it. So, I mean, and she was so busy yelling go at that point, she wouldn't have noticed that. So that was interesting. And then we jump back to them at the diner again, and then leading into, they got to talk about the Santa Killers.
Yeah. I loved Jesse's description of his voice. That crawling, grinding whisper, spitting hell and ghost and cobwebs in your ear. I was just sitting there, and I already was piqued about and curious about this name Saint of Killers, just to hear that description. And they're all just a little bit shaken, a little bit freaky about this creature. I was like, oh, this is going to be good.
Every time I read this one, this is true back when I originally read it as a monthly series, this always felt, it's not a true Western per se, but it felt very Western. You know, it's almost like a modern day Western tale, because he's very much the outlaw, the gunslinger. It's clear that he's the nice guy who, you know, isn't afraid to step up and roll up his sleeves and you know, push the doors aside and go into the bar and take care of business. But yet there's strong moral code about him, and I love that. But we see, you know, awake when we open up the Saint of Killers coffin. Oh. There's a snake on top of it, and he just gets shot right away. And I do love that we find out later that there's even more to that was an expectation of what was going to happen to him.
I love that. He's like, why? Force of habit. I just, you know, it was funny because leading into this, I kind of saw that coming. It was just one of those things. Just the way they laid it out. He's going down to this hidden tomb underneath tombs, that's underneath Boot Hill, and it was just like, oh, this dude's so dead. Put a red shirt on him. He's toast. And sure enough, open the casket. Boom. Opens up with that.
And if you read that Saint of Killers miniseries, you will become the biggest fan. This will be a sympathetic character to you. Because his story is one, like how he wound up this way.
Oh, man. Okay.
There is a whole story as to how he wound up this way, where he becomes this major sympathetic character. And he's got a storyline that goes through the entire series as well. So he is a character that you want to read this whole thing, because there's nobody that's introduced that doesn't have an importance throughout the entire series. I mean, there's characters who do die, and there's characters who don't make it to the end and all that. We actually see some, very early on in this. But he is one of those characters that throughout the entire series, has a role at various times.
Cool.
And he has a storyline that will come to conclusion at the end of it. So he is one of those characters that is, and it's not as, I'm not revealing anything by that other than the sense that there's a beginning and middle and ending to the Saint of Killers storyline that is very satisfying and very worth following. And I'll leave that at that, but this is one of the things that I loved about this series, is that I'm rereading this now and looking at these characters and, whoa. I love that. What do you call that? A
good start. Yeah, that was, and I love that this lead into that, because he's sitting there and he's like, I'm gonna Delphi, one of the host of angels. I've never even thought about sinning.
It's a Defi.
What?
It's a Defi.
A Defi? A Delphi? A Delphi? Hey, come on, I get it close.
No, I was just wondering. It's funny. We talked about how we went to Catholic school, or PSR, whatever you want to call it. We have that history. I would be interested to know. I don't know a lot about what would be considered religious lore when it comes to the angels, as far as that hierarchy like that. I'm wondering how much of these were actually pulled from.
Well, the Seraphi are seraphim,
right.
which are that's the highest order of the angel. Mm-hmm. I couldn't really, and actually, because I was sitting there thinking the same thing, I couldn't remember a Defi, so I started actually doing a little research, and I don't know where they got that one from, because it's not a play off of anything on the different levels, on the different tiers. I couldn't find any reference to a Defi other than Preacher, references to Preacher.
I have already an email that's going to be, we're going to air some emails relating to Preacher at least on our second or third part, depending on where they fit in relation to our discussions. But if anybody knows that, I would love to, for our second discussion, to follow up with this. If anybody knows if there is a history at this on some level, in some religious connotation, I would love to know that. So if anybody, that's kind of a good one to throw on listeners, if you're aware of it. It could be something completely original for this story, and that's
as far as I can tell, it looks like it. But it's not even. It is an original name, but there's definitely, and I can't think, I'm drawing a blank now, there is definitely the angels who are this role. There are you have the warrior on one side and then the scientist on the other, the thinker and the actor, both on either side of God, sit on the throne and part of.
So the Defi would be considered the scientist role,
right?
Then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the people who when the devil was cast out, you send your archangels. But when Mary received the word, and when dealings with dealings with Adam, or dealing with other people who are hearing the word of God, they're really hearing from these angels, and it's the different choirs of angels. It's I
do know.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
You know.
I was just laughing. As we go back to him giving his sermon, and I thought this was really interesting, because there's these moments where the two of them make eye contact, and you can feel the tension between them and cut it like a knife. This is a great moment, because it's clear that it never happens, and that we're leading into a discussion about Genesis, but she's immediately curious. Just out of interest, what would your sermon have been about? And he looks right at her and says, forgiveness. And it's clear that he means, that's his way of saying, I'm sorry, and trying to bring that home to her, and trying to get her to let him back in. He is giving her, throughout the entire series, throughout the entire first 12 issues here, the full court press.
Oh, yeah. And it was funny because as he said that, I just started immediately thinking, what kind of forgiveness sermon would he give? Because there's a couple different ways in my head he could have handled this. He could have gone with the whole, the grace and glory and to forgive, or he could have actually turned it on them and say, hey, I'm going to forgive you for your sins. I'm going to forgive you for the fact that you cracked me in the head and left me lying in a pool of vomit. This is a new beginning for us all, kind of, and actually gone on the offensive. Because I've seen a lot of, like, people who have guilt or guilty feelings, they turn on their victims, because he betrayed a lot of their trust, but they've also, we saw in the bar, we was talking about how there's the unspoken actions that they've taken against him. So there's a lot of forgiveness to go on the side. And I'm wondering which way he would have gone with it. I was just thinking, like, that'd be kind of a neat thing. Plus,
well, you know what? I think it was totally forgiveness as far as trying to speak to his parishioners at that point. But he was totally using at that moment. He was totally relating it to Tulip at that point.
Yeah.
Whether or not that. And wait, there's even a question at this point. Was that really even his sermon?
It may not have been.
Just making that up all at the cuff, just saying, hey, I'm going to do everything I can to take every moment to get in. Because there's a little bit of that with him as well.
He's working it. Yeah. He's working the game.
Yeah. We see Genesis here come bursting through and taking a part of Jesse Custer at this point. And, wow. And this was a pivotal change and point for him as well, because how do you deal with wiping out...
Everyone,
yeah.
And that was the thing they said, how the entire town was there for this sermon.
And you see them. I mean, they go all Raiders of the Lost Ark here.
Oh, yeah. That's just bones and dust. That's all that's left there. And I was just like, wow. And I love that scene where they showed Genesis kind of like standing behind him as he's frying everybody. You see that the clove-hooved, bottoms.
Well, that's internal. That's not behind him.
Well, but the way the art's drawn.
Yeah.
It's the way the art's drawn is what I'm talking. But you can see the combination of half demon, half angel. I love that. You got the clove-hooved bottoms. You got the winged hair angel. You kind of got the flowing blonde hair, which I'm assuming is going along on the angel side. So I like
the Seraphim before. Yeah, exactly. It's very much looking at that, which was just really cool. And the explosion at that point that they see in the distance. So did you take that there that Tulip has now seen that explosion?
Yeah. They were driving through Texas, to get away from because they were in Dallas when the hit happened. So they're driving through Texas, but they pulled over because of the sun was, coming up. So he needed to pull over, and he's sitting there in the back of the pickup with that tarp draped over. And I loved this sequencing just because this shows, he's like, hey, don't drive. He's like, wait, I see you're still driving. Come on, pull over now. As soon as the sun sets, young lady, you're in trouble. And I was just dying because she's completely just ignoring the fact that, one, he's sleeping in a tarp in the bed of his truck in the broad daylight, but two, he's telling her to stop. He's like, I got to see what this is. It was one of those kind of destiny things drawing her or just dumb luck. I don't know which one it was. I'm leaning a little bit more on the destiny side of the story, but who knows?
Tulip is really an interesting character because she's drawn into... I love the way she's drawn. Because she's drawn to be very much a real woman, in the sense that she's not drawn to be, like, overly, like, excessively beautiful, if that makes sense. Yet there's something immediately attractive about her strength and of who she is. I mean, I love the way that this character is characterized. She's drawn. She looks very hard, like as in life has really...
Yeah, she's had some time.
Yeah, but yet there is still something pretty about her that it's hard to explain. It's an interestingly well-crafted character that you get like the full gambit. She's hard, she's independent, yet she can be soft and beautiful at other times. And this character works in all of those facets that you can see why Jesse's attracted to her.
Yeah,
as you get to know her.
Yeah, as you get to know her, you really see just the sexiness, just the female that, the female you could bring home to mom because she's not just a pretty face. There is some substance behind her. Yeah, she's got her history. She's got there's definitely some bad stuff that has happened to her, but there's still a good heart there. And, I like seeing her, throughout this, where it's just this inquisitive nature of her that she's going into this, a giant mushroom crawl out into the sky, and she's driving to see it.
Yeah, I guess that was my question before, because we were saying that Tulip saw this, and the reason why I asked that question, I wanted to head in this route. Would you do that? Like, if you saw a big bomb go off like that in the distance, would you drive to see it, or would you drive home to see it on the news? I don't know if I have a good answer for that myself, but I'm curious.
I don't know. I'm a bit of a coward, so I try not to throw myself in immediate harm's danger. But I don't know. I think part of me, I don't know. It's a toughie because it all depends on
who I was with.
Yeah, it really, like, if it was you and me, I'd probably say, "You want to check that out? Yeah, well, let's check that out."
Do it. Yeah, but it's funny.
But if I was like with me and my mom, there's no way I would, because I'd be worried about some danger happening to mom.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it if I was with my wife. I don't see myself doing that because I don't know if I want to drive into that kind of danger.
Right. You don't know what it is. Was that just the initial explosion? Is there going to be more?
Back. She'd want to go. Yeah. So no, I'd probably go in that case as well. But it would depend on, like, if the person I was with, like, if you and I were together, we'll use that example, and you really said to me, dude, I don't want any part of this, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
But if you were like, you want to go see that? I think that's all it would take for me. I would be on that fence. Because I do get curious about...
There's a definite curiosity. And, of course, we know what happened to the cat, so...
No, yeah, exactly, in this particular case. But imagine showing up and seeing this. It's a church that is all burnt down at that point. And then finding in there the only survivor is her former lover.
Yeah. I know, and I tell you, one of the things that also in this sequence I really liked seeing was the softer... the good side of Cassidy. As he's sitting there, as he's telling her, hey, stop, I'm telling you, I'm warning you. When they actually get to the scene, he's like, hey, if it's as bad as you say, grab that gun. So he is thinking about her safety. He knows he can't do anything. So he's like, hey, why don't you make sure you're safe? And I liked seeing that secondary side of him, right from the beginning. He knows he can see what we see about her. There's something good about her. This isn't just, some cold-blooded killer. He's like, hey, watch yourself. It
was also my first indication that he might have a thing for her.
Yeah, could be.
To a certain extent. When I remember reading that the first time through, I'm like, what is his deal? Does he have a thing for her?
Yeah.
And what is that going to do to their friendship down the road? And I don't know. It was one of those things where I remember reading that. I was like, whoa, what's he doing at that point? I don't know. It was funny. I'm really impressed with her that she was stomping through all those skulls.
Yeah, that was freaky, man. That had a very apocalyptic type feel to it, especially it's a church. It's very clearly and obviously a church. So you see this nasty destruction where you got these dead bodies, well, not even dead bodies. You got skeletons littered all around the place. And you're just like, the place is completely trashed and destroyed, and she's going through, and I love the art sequences on that. As she's walking through, she's got the gun up, she's sitting there ready for something to pop up and put a couple rounds into them. So
it's an interesting sequence because, going back to our previous question, all right, we're already there at the church at this point, and we're seeing it there. Do you go through it like she is, or do you assume that whatever caused this might be nearby? And, at what point in time do you see the skulls? Because, there's that part of myself that if I heard people screaming for help, I would go in. I know that much about myself, that if I heard the screams, that part of myself that would feel guilt, and that's really what it is, and that's honesty there, that would be the part of me like, I've got to go do something. I could not live with myself if I didn't. So I know I would do that, but in this case, she doesn't hear anything. You see a bunch of dead skulls, lying all over the place. Do you worry that whatever caused this is still around? Because this is clearly not a fire.
Yeah. See, here's my deal with this. If I did actually go to this, and I'm assuming that I did go, I wouldn't go in unless I saw signs of someone of life in there.
Yeah,
because
I would do that.
I'm thinking, this is a crime scene. You got to protect and preserve the crime scene. You got to make sure that my going in there doesn't disrupt, the evidence, and tamper with the evidence that, would actually help. I'm thinking criminal investigation now. Once I arrive on that scene, it's, there's something going on here. I'm like, and I would go around the perimeter and see if I could see any signs.
Yeah,
if I saw a sign of life, I would go in. The other thing I would be is flipping.
I wouldn't be stomping through like.
Yeah, I wouldn't be stomping through unless I saw something. I would stay on the outside, and it's mostly main thing that I'm thinking would be the evidence trail.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny, her characterization and who she is, I'm not surprised at all she did this. But I was like thinking, I'm like, would I stomp through there like this? I'm with you. I would do the perimeter search. I would look for any signs of anybody. Like if I saw like Jesse at all,
right?
Saw a leg or anything, I'd be in there. Especially because of the fact that all you see is skulls and bones everywhere else.
Yeah, if you saw a body in there, then
you'd have to question, is that person okay? And if I don't act now, then what happens? And that becomes your instant justification with your crime scene. I honestly would have been thinking of the crime scene. But going back to that would have probably been with you. You would have brought that up. So,
yeah.
If we saw
dude, first thing I would like, dude, hold on. This is a crime scene. We got to back, check around and secure the perimeter.
But I would have been looking and I'm like, there's a guy there. We got to see if that person's okay because that's our justification at that point to go in. It is interesting. Now, here was the funny part. As we get to the end of this issue, it's our first glimpse at the John Wayne-style character, which is, in many ways, Jesse's own... Jesse's got something... it's clear this guy's got a psychosis. He's got something a little wrong with him. He's got his own imaginary friend.
Hey, nothing wrong with imaginary friends. I have them all the time.
Right. But, that is one of the interesting things about him with Jesse. He seems so normal and so well put together, and that is the first sign that there are chinks in the armor. And I liked that. I immediately liked that because he is somebody that you can relate to and go,
he was
cool as he is.
Yeah, the John Wayne was a definite what the kind of moment for me. And it was something that when I first time reading it through, not knowing anything behind who and what and why, I was like, okay, I'm going to file this away as a mystery to be unveiled later, and I'm not going to pass judgment on it this first time through. Because that first time, it really threw me as a, kind of moment that I'm like, okay, we'll see how this plays out. Up until this point in time, I was pretty cool with, dealing with what I was seeing and passing off as a story and, okay, yeah, this is a pretty cool story element. This is interesting. That one was okay. And I can be honest with you, now knowing that, what I know about him, I really like, John Wayne. I think
I do too.
I really, especially who I think he stands for, and we'll get to that later as we discuss, the upcoming chapters and all that. But that is a really cool character element, and just little, as you said, a little chink behind who Jesse is.
This is one of those books too. I would say that if you've read Preacher and only read it once, if you read the whole series and only read it through once, and you never went back and reread the beginning after reading the ending. I don't want to reveal anything for people that are reading this through for the first time, but it is so well worth reading all of these sequences, knowing more about John Wayne, knowing more about... Because, as I said when we were talking about this earlier, everything in this does build more later, and you get to learn why Jesse has this going on, and you get to learn later the answers to things that you're asking right now, Jim. And it is worth reading this series through again after you've read it completely to see how all of this was laid out and just how well crafted this is, because it's very cool.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Sheriff Root, the racist, to the point that he's willing to say just absurd things.
Oh yeah, I tell you, this is a character, first time read through, I hated him. I absolutely hated him. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't even hate as a character, how you would hate the bad guy. I hated just because I really, it angers me, because there's a lot of really good cops out there. And there's a lot of really good, good old boy Southern, and Texas guys they're not these redneck hate mongers. Mm-hmm. And I hate seeing these characters who could, be a positive thing, presented this way, because I'm like, they're not all like this. There are people out there who have a badge who are only doing it because they want to be able to legally kick somebody's butt. I fully admit, yes, there are, but there are a lot of people out there who put on the badge every day, who put their life on the line to protect and serve the public. And this is, one of those things where I kind of do, I puff out my chest a little bit, and I go to bat for, the lawmen. So when I first read this, I was like, oh, come on, did you have to go with the hate? Oh, not only is he a redneck, he's a hate monger and racist. Oh, and it wasn't until completely reading through the story of Sheriff Root and everything that he went through that I was like, okay, I understand why he did that. Okay, yeah, this is, I no longer hate this guy. I love this character. This is just one of those magnificently wonderful terrible people. And it was like, okay, I get why he did this. I get why he went so over the top with this character. And he really went over the top
well,
on the hating.
Circumstance. And circumstance, too, made Sheriff Root who he is.
Oh, he is just an absolute SOB. And I'm just like, wow. There's a couple stuff we're going to talk about later on that I was just like, my God, I can't even imagine doing something like that. That is just beyond just mean and nasty. That is just pure evil.
He's like an insanely evil Buford T. Justice from
Yes.
Smokey and the Bandit. Like, insanely evil, though. And also, Root likes to believe that his station is higher than it is.
Yeah.
You know, and there's people like that just, they can't accept that, like, what you do and who you are is great. You don't need to project yourself as being anything more than you are. But it's his own insecurities that are playing off of that. And that's what I like about Root 2. In the outward appearance when you first see him, it looks like he totally believes what he's spewing out there. In reality, he's hiding a lot of pain, a lot of self-doubt, and a lot of real awareness of what life really is like for him and how he's viewed.
It's interesting because you mentioned earlier, about how these characters who are so hateful and they put down people just to inflate themselves up.
Yeah.
And he is so that character and that's so that personality that he wants any single time that he can prove that he is right. And yes, you see, I am right. This is the way I am. It's because of these insecurities.
It's a counter to his own pain.
Oh God, yeah. It's he's one of those deeply complex characters that on the surface is an a-hole. When you get a little bit deeper, he's still an a-hole, but there's explanation and understanding behind it. And I don't want to even say there's some stuff I feel bad for him about, but he's had some circumstances in his life that I do feel bad. And I don't know if he was a jerk before they happened or after they happened. There's evidence to say both ways, which I'm like, do I want to feel bad for the guy, or has he always been this jerk that I shouldn't feel bad for him?
Now, what's interesting is reading this now, when you see Tulip, and I guess, what level of, at this point when you got to this particular sequence, what level of a relationship did you think they had in the past?
Well, she said they ran into she saw her ex-boyfriend.
No, I know that, but I mean, what level, like, okay, boyfriend, girlfriend can be, casually dating.
Well, I was thinking serious. I was thinking serious relationship when she said that.
Which I think is interesting here, because imagine now walking into a situation with a serious relationship where now all of a sudden this person has become part of the clergy. Or of a clergy. Because I'm assuming that the idea here is he can't get married. He can't.
Well, see, I took it not
or
because...
Or are you thinking that he's not?
I took it, this is one of those religions where he can get married. This isn't Catholic priests, because they're definitely... That's why the whole preacher and minister, I was thinking...
As long as the family approves and that the person's quote-unquote proper?
Yeah, and part of the church and all that stuff. And
Tulip, I don't think would have ever been, according to the family, which we'll get. I don't think we're getting to today,
no.
But I don't think she would have been considered proper in any way, shape, or form ever, even if he had completely given in. So that's the interesting part of the whole thing there. But he wakes up, and it is funny how his first reaction, the second that he knows it's her, his whole congregation was vaporized. Do you think he knows that here?
I don't know. I think he was probably bombarded with so much information at that point in time that he was running on autopilot. So he sees this, who we see is the love of his life. That's his. We'll find out exactly how deep his emotions go towards her. That his first reaction is to kiss her. He probably is emotionally, mentally, physically drained, and he sees this beacon of light, so he reaches out for it.
And remember, he hasn't connected with yet. Remember, he has a point later where he starts to connect with Genesis.
Right.
He hadn't, at this point in the storytelling, he hadn't made that connection with Genesis yet to understand what was going on. And this is where we find out actually the truth of Genesis with the angel and demon and all that. That
that's a really cool art sequence where they show these two going at it, but it's not. It was never anything really of a sexual kind of nature. It wasn't pornographic or anything like that. It was just this really. I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain. I liked just the explanation of Genesis, the birth of how this character has come to be and this being. And as Jesse's slowly getting the information unfolded to him, he gets bits and pieces along this route. And I know that later on in stories that I haven't read yet, there's probably going to be even more information he's going to get. He doesn't have the full story about Genesis. There's more to come. And I love that, just the way this story's being told. This is a beautiful flow out, and that's why I loved reading this in the trade format. I probably would have gone nuts. You know what, to be honest, I don't know if I had read this in a monthly, I want to say that I would have continued reading it, but I don't know. This would be a tough one for me because it would be one of those things where what really pulled me in was just this constant boom, 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 boom like that. If I had to wait a month,
but look at
that would have
how much
driven
we've
me
already
nuts.
gotten. We're not through issue 1 yet.
Yeah, I know.
And look how much content was in here.
Yeah.
So you got to remember, when you read this the first time, out of the starting gate, this first issue
that's a meaty
really
first issue.
delivered a lot of that boom, boom, boom you're talking about right away.
Yeah.
You're fed a lot of information. You're given a lot to make you question, think. I mean, we got right here. It is funny. You could take a look at what went on with the angel and the demon as an allegory between how people react to race in general.
Yeah.
And just by the fact that these two, because they were different and they fell in love.
Yeah, they broke the rules.
Yes, and look at how all these people. So it really is a slap to the face to racism in general in this book. I like that. I like that aspect of it, that it laughs at all of those quirks that humanity naturally has. The things that we, Root. You're right. Root is over the top because they're laughing at that.
Yeah.
And you've got to, because we've got to take a look at. I love fiction that makes you look at society's flaws and laugh at how silly they are, and really throws them in your face, and is not afraid to make you uncomfortable with them.
Yeah. Well, mankind we are just. There are days when I absolutely just hate mankind. Mm-hmm. I really just hate who we are and what we do and why we do it. And, I get notions in my head where I'd like to be this great activist and, bring about change, social, moral, and all the various, the whatnot. Get that change, get it corrected, get it done right. And I know I don't have. It's
the
like
change and the whatnot.
Yeah,
what does that even mean?
I don't think. It's a toughie because I'm sitting there and I don't want to say.
Which is why you said in the whatnot.
Right, partially, but it's also. I don't want to come on like I'm sitting on a soapbox, that like I'm so perfect and I'm so wonderful. I know the way life should be.
No, and see, I like that about this.
Yeah, and that's what I get from, and that's whenever there's the religion like stories and there's ever the explanations, and whether it's a book, a movie, a TV show, or anything like that, when they start getting to religion, I always get worried that they're going to go that way. They're going to say, no, you're wrong because like your religion's a crutch. It doesn't let you free think. Like, no, it does let you free think, but there are this guidelines and these principles and this doctrine that you believe in your heart is true. And it's like I would like to see that all of us get together and all of us have this understanding.
This is more powerful because it doesn't get quote unquote preachy.
Preachy, yeah, I know.
And I didn't mean to go there. I didn't mean, no pun intended. But it really is one of those things. What I like about it is, and I think where it's more an interesting moral. You get to take a look at a moral viewpoint in a unique way, is they throw it in your face, they laugh at it, and they leave you to think about it.
Yeah.
Leave you to walk away with what you do and to interpret the way that you do. Because that's not necessarily part of the overall overarching story. It's stuff that you can read into it and do with what you will. I'm a big fan of that because I do think that we tend to look at it more realistically then. We tend to make our own judgments about it. This discussion right now, it's clearly not on the pages.
Yeah.
But yet it's things that you can interpret, and I'm sure people listening probably interpreted this in their own way.
Yeah, it may be a completely different viewpoint.
Actually, I'll defend the one thing. When you're trying to put a word on it, even he can't put a word on what he's going through at this moment. Because he tries to sit there and say things like, it sounds like the word of God. And he's really, you can even say there, stuff you wouldn't believe, but it's because he can't label it. He can't describe it. He can't put the word, what does the word of God sound like? Well, and that's what he's trying to say. It's something you can't describe. It is something, it's a feeling, it's beyond that. It's an idea, it's a concept, it's so much more. In that statement, he says a lot about that whole experience that I think is just kind of cool.
Yeah, it's
the whatnot. Like
it's the whatnot.
Yeah, I'll actually defend you.
Yeah,
on
it's sometimes it just means whatnot. Yeah.
But it's funny, these two getting put in the middle of all that, and Cassidy just trying to figure out, like, how much do I really want to get involved into any of this?
I know. I feel bad for the guy because he's just like, hey, first off, I agreed to drive you halfway across Texas. Now we picked up your boyfriend. Now we got this. What the heck's going on here? I'm out of here. I want to go my own separate way.
Oh, and of course, thinking of himself, okay, pretty girl who seems kind of wild, little nuts, maybe a lot nuts. For somebody like me who's lived for so long, because we know.
Do I need this?
Do I need
this aggravation?
Yeah, but now all of a sudden, how is this interesting to me? You could tell from his discussions with her, he's kind of like, well, I don't want you to die because half the fun of hanging out with you was. And it is clear that somebody in his position, if he wants to be able to move around during the day, needs her.
He needs a daytime companion.
Yeah, because it probably keeps him more mobile and keeps his life more interesting to be able to have something like that. So for him, he's looking for that symbiotic relationship, but he's not looking for Three's company.
Right.
So, but of course, before he has a chance to really get into it, the police show up and we get to see the Word for the first time, which to me is just one of the coolest segments because just the determination. He knew at that point, and I don't know if he would be able to describe why he knew that would work. Drop the guns, all of you, and let us go. It was instinct. That was pure instinct because he hadn't connected with Genesis enough yet to know.
Yeah. He didn't know how to activate the power, but that was for me. I took it as more like Genesis, reacting, bringing the, saying, "Hey, you got this force, use it, bam."
And you see the determination on his face, though, and I like that because it's clear that I agree with what you're saying that there's Genesis is driving some of this, but Jesse instinctively knows here and just does this. It's a determination. It's an anger. It's a whatever it was at that point. And I love how Tulip is just amazed, and even Cassidy, you can see it. Here's the funny part. You only see Cassidy's glasses here, but if you look at the eyebrows and the facial structure and the way that that's drawn, that's great art. You can only see that much of his face, yet you see shock and surprise on that face. And that's just you're seeing from the tip of his nose up to the top, just right above his eyebrows. That's all you're seeing. And wow. Kudos to the art team on that because that looks really, really cool that you can see that much expression out of him in such a small sequence.
Oh, big time! And that's couple of the other sequences with the art. Of course, this the usage of the coloring changing from when it's the Word. I love just that close up of his face when you see that he's got the red eyes as he's lashing out with the Word. That was just another just. I've been talking a lot about the story and but there is just some great visual artwork that is going along with this. This is another one of those books where you really need to see it. If this was just a written story, it would be a great story. But it's the fact that you're physically seeing this, it come alive, and that is really a strength of the emotional set and just what is going on in this book. A lot of these, pulling us into the story was the visual artwork, and it wasn't just this great story. This is a visually pleasing one. This is a beautiful meshing of writing and art together to just create something that is just like, wow, this is a neat book.
And we do see, it's just really interesting when you take a look at all this, that the sunlight's coming up at this point, and we see with Jesse's face, we see like it's like done in like kind of a grayish tone, I'm guessing, and forgive me on the color tones on that, but that did add, you're right, the power to the eyes, because that color, I think if he had just been a regular, his regular skin tone that we see in the previous sessions, that it wouldn't have had as much power right there, but it really did stand out at that point. I also love the bit where the gun's dropping out of the helicopter.
Yeah, well, there's a helicopter shooter. He drops the gun.
Drops the gun right on the guy's head. Because he had to drop it at that moment.
And later on, you'll see that guy, he has blood on his head. Mm-hmm. And they keep that going through.
Yeah, nice attention to detail.
Yeah, I love that. That was just a great, just a nice piece. That's something where I would love to see if that was in this script, or if the art team said, hey, let's keep the blood going here, or how that was. That's something where I'd love to know just the behind. There's some stories out there that I'd love to read the script on just to see what was said.
I got to tell you, I'd sure as hell appreciate a ride out of here. And, the look on his face right there, and the stare down with Cassidy, and just the smirk off of Cassidy's face, I could do with some crazy in my life, right? That moment, oof. But Root, we go back to Root there, and again, deflection. Rather than admitting that he can't pick up his own gun, he yells at the rest of the officers there for not picking up theirs. And that again goes back to an inferiority complex that this guy has that we talked about earlier. He's got to do that in order to deflect from the fact that he can't pick his up.
He dropped his as well. He messed up.
And never admits that he can't.
Right. And it's you think about just this character, who he is. He's spent his whole probably life just proving what a tough guy is, and he's completely has no control over this. He's been completely just reduced to a little. Just Jesse's little biatch, with one simple word, drop the guns, boom. I love just that, there's just so much anger and just anger at himself going through this guy that he's just lashing out. And that was just, that could have been a great ending for it, but it doesn't end there. We get to see our first glimpses of Saint of Killer, and I was oh, dang. That is just, I saw that, I was like, oh my God, we have some supernatural killing machine versus the trigger-happy, redneck sheriff hate
And we don't quite understand the level of his supernatural nature yet.
Right.
He comes walking onto the scene, but you don't look at him to me, like the man who'll take him. And it's just, wow, what a powerful ending. That's what I mean, though. When you were talking about, you don't know if you could have read this monthly, look at how much how much story we got right in that first issue, and you're left with the Saint of Killers cliffhanger. You're picking up issue 2.
I would be picking up issue 2.
Especially when you got a cover like this.
Yeah.
The Glenn Fabry cover of Saint of Killers looking for Jesse. That was my experience. I read the first issue of this when it came out, and I was like, how long do I have to wait for the second issue?
Yeah, I'd be miffed, yeah.
Because I wasn't, when this came out, I was not reading as much as I'm reading today. So, I'd get a comic, and literally there was no back pile of comics. You'd have I had a short stack of comics at this point. This was college years for me that I was reading this book. I was like, whoa, this is just awesome. This was at the time, it was like one of 5 books I was reading.
Yeah, oh, God.
So, I reread this in the month that it was coming out.
I remember reread that thing multiple times.
Oh, yeah. So you were chomping at the bit by the time issue 2 came out for more Preacher. And this is just one of those series that the ride just kept on going. So anyway, let's talk about issue 2 then.
We are Crystal Men from Mercury. We have no quarrel with you.
It's funny, when we did start this podcast way back when, this was one of the ones that I was thinking of doing, at least in a limited fashion, a lot earlier. Like, we were going to do this one, like back when we did things like Watchmen and stuff like that initially, the first time through, which were much shorter segments than what we do today. I was thinking of doing Preacher, and you and I are both just talking about it. I'm glad we waited, because we wouldn't have covered this the way that we do. And it's an interesting book to talk about just the levels of interpretation you can go into with this book, that some of which, you got to wonder, how much did Ennis really intend for you to go into? And sometimes, good stories, you sometimes take away a whole bunch of things that were never intended, and connect with it in a personal way that, if we had some of our listeners sitting in here with us right now having these discussions, they may have viewed certain segments of this completely differently than we did. Issue 2, when we open up, it starts to expand the storyline even more, where Root finally has to start telling his story. And who would believe that story?
Yeah. He just got owned by Saint of Killers, and
looks like he's making an excuse too.
Yeah.
But I loved that they started off with that as a 1-page, and that was really, if you had done more than that, it would have been a huge mistake. But this is a great example of good storytelling pacing, because they give one quick panel that flashes back to what was going on with Saint of Killers. Then you flip the page, and it's a huge panel of us actually seeing what, and like the title of this one, and hell followed with him.
Yes.
What better opening? Splash, than the Saint of Killers doing that. And I was immediately engaged with this character at this point. I was like, I want to know everything I can know about the Saint of Killers. Why is he like this? What is he doing? It wasn't until much later that they actually did the Preacher special miniseries involving him. But when it did come out, I glued to it, and it totally delivered. That's been the great thing about this series is, if you think the first 12 issues are good for anyone who's reading this, it only gets better. Like, this series, it totally had a beginning, middle, and ending, and there is a build to this. You know, like these 12 issues build, there is a build to this that does not let up all the way through.
Nice.
Because the first 12 issues are really a lot of getting to know you issues, where we're really getting into the backstory. What happens when you get past the backstory? And that's where the story really gets wild.
Yeah. These sequences with him was one of those things where and it's weird that this would be another one of those kind of moral dilemmas I had, because, these are cops. These are honest, cops. And, I was looking forward to seeing this, Saint of Killers open up. But when I'm actually seeing him unload on honest cops, I felt bad. I was like, is this should I be enjoying this as much as I'm enjoying it? Because, it's once again, I could see the great, powerful story behind this. And just the fact that it's got me really thinking that this guy isn't a force of good for God. This is the Saint of Killers. He is just this nasty killing machine. So for him, killing these cops is no big deal. It
was funny when I first read this. I remember, and even when I read this for the first time to prepare for this, I'm like, did Root get shot there in the beginning? And I was looking over that because you see the original thing, and then it dawned on me, I'm looking through there again, I'm like, that's all blood splatter.
Yeah.
That's what's going in his eye and all that. I don't know why. It was one of those things that had been so long since I read this book. I'm like, I know Root had a bigger story than this, because I knew what ultimately happened to Root when I had read it again this time. But I was like, I don't understand this. I said, I don't remember Root getting shot so early in the series. And then I was looking through again, oh my gosh, that's blood splatter. And it was kudos to that again, because there's so much action going on that you don't know who's getting hit, and you start looking back through and you start to see, oh wait a minute, he got hit, and I start to pick out the bits where the Saint of Killers actually starts taking out people and picking them off. This reads so much better again, knowing Saint of Killers' real motivations and where that all came from.
I got to read this. I got to find out what that is, because this, as I said, this was one of those difficult things, because I do have issues when I see cops getting killed. I do feel bad, and I was like, these are honest, lawmen. Not Root. I could understand, because Root is an SOB to me, but his deputies and the other officers, I don't know if these are bad guys, and they're getting just hammered down. And I kind of like seeing the fact that later on we see them open up and they tried fighting back a little bit, but it does absolutely nothing. It's one of those things where they're like, okay, I'm going down swinging, but this is not going to end well for anybody.
It's clear that Root's deputy here is clearly a man who has little to no respect for Root, is realizing that Root is in his position because of longevity, will probably never be out of his position, but he knows, I could do this job so much better than Root could. He's terrible to his people, the way he talks to them, because he's the one that told him to pick up his own gun. So it's clear that he is like, for as much as Root alienates the people and downgrades them, this guy is very secure in who he is. He's probably the one that the guys go to, like, hey, can you talk to Root for us?
Yeah, he's the honest cop stuck in dealing with this jerk. And there's so many times when, just in any profession, where you have the people who are in power who shouldn't be in power, and you got the person right underneath them who does really all the work. You see that completely, and that guy just gets hammered. He gets gunned down. And, that was one of the things where I didn't like seeing that, but I knew this was a very powerful part of the story. That I was like, okay, this is one of those things where I did have to put down personal feelings aside. And there's constantly this conflict. As I'm reading this, I was enjoying what I was reading, but there were some really digs into my moral character, stuff that I normally do not like seeing.
Now, you can see the reality here, too, that Root is not the man that he's projecting himself outward to be.
Yeah.
Because right away, now you can see I ain't armed, mister. Right away, he's not, there's no outrage to the death of his crew.
Right.
If I'm a sheriff, I'm not. But if I am, I would have some kind of sense of, I am responsible for these guys. Jesse talks about responsibility earlier. when he talks about his congregation and how even though he didn't want that station, he was responsible for that. I do know that about myself, that if I was responsible for a group of people, the outrage there would be they were on my watch. That's my responsibility. I need, in my own job, I have that responsibility. That's a level that I have of responsibility. Not that I have to worry about them getting shot, but I mean, there is a responsibility and a code for people that are in your charge. Whether it's adults, kids, whatever, that's your responsibility at that point. And when I read this segment, I'm like, whoa, he doesn't care.
Yeah.
He would care with how it affects how people view him, in his overall station. But he, as far as personally, he doesn't. He doesn't have a friendship with these people.
Yeah, and it's, when the chopper comes in and basically saves him, because the Saint of Killer was just about to drop him. He didn't care whether he was armed or unarmed. He was going to kill him. And the helicopter gets in there and they tell him, hey, run. You see him just take off. And, well, we don't actually see him take off running, but in the later discussions, we see that he basically just started sprinting. And right. I admit that I'm not the bravest person in the world. Run is one of my favorite, usages on the City of Heroes game we do. But there is a difference between that. This guy just cut down your men. I'd love to think that I would reach down, grab the gun, and start firing right along with the helicopter.
Well, this is like your friends getting gunned down.
Yeah, this is
family.
This is more than that.
There's an ethics. There's responsibility there at that point in time where it's like, how much of that can you watch before you're gonna man up or step up? Man up's not the right word because you see females doing this kind of stuff all the time too, where in the right situation,
you got
gut check time. That's
you got to knuckle up to it, and you got to throw down.
Yeah, I mean that's one of those moments where I do think in extreme situations like that, you're either going to do A or B, and I'd like to think I wouldn't do the sheriff route.
Yeah, and this is really a great just showing that there is a. Who the real character and personality behind Root. You hit it right on the head when you said that there's no outrage in the death of his people.
No, I'd be angry.
You know what? Here's the thing. With law enforcement, especially law enforcement, military, that type of, spirit of core, brotherhood, persona type of, you mess with one, you mess with them all. Whether they think that guy's the biggest jerk in the world, he's still one of them. And Root is completely going against that whole genre, that whole mindset of the Brotherhood. And it's
there's coworkers that I work with right now who I've worked with for 12 years that I genuinely, or less, but even so, but I mean, I genuinely care about them. I respect them as people. They're friends. Almost to the level that you're with them all day long. They're almost to the level of family. In their own way. And if I saw them cut down in front of me on this level, there's outrage there.
Yeah, there's emotional reaction.
That has to overcome your own fear at that point for your own safety. It's crazy. But Jesse, one of the things I like about Jesse is clearly here the man's man. And when Saint of Killers comes through all those explosions, walking straight through, he recognizes this is a guy, Jesse's not a guy who would back down. That's not who he is. He's not cut that way. But when he sees Saint of Killers and the look on that guy's face, he's a warrior who knows, I am dealing with somebody here that could take out both of the people I'm with. And his first thought is, it goes back to what I said before, when we said we were driving in. Would we drive in towards the explosion? If my wife was with me, would I drive in? Probably not. If you're with me, it's different when you got two guys. Like that's him and Cassidy. Like if you and I go and that's that role, he would not want Tulip there. And I love that was his immediate concern right away because that just read so well for me. And I do love that they don't believe Root.
Here's the thing. That was something that angered me initially because you got to, as I said before, it's, cop killers would take the top priority. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting there, and as I'm sitting there reading it, they're talking that they got all the APBs on Jesse and he's their prime focus. I'm like, what? Their prime focus would be Saint of Killers. Their prime focus would be this guy who gunned down, but who gunned down these cops. But then, as I'm reading, I'm realizing they don't believe him. And I love the one line where they say, "So they killed 14 people with 2 revolvers. Now revolvers are 6 shots, so that's 12 shots only. He gunned down 14 people with only 12 shots available, is what they're saying." And as soon as I read that, when it took me like a second read through to really understand, I'm like, oh my God, they think Root's just touched in the head. They don't think he knows what the hell is going on. And
so they feel that right now they have their main suspect. I mean, their main witness to this whole scenario is trying to cover his own butt.
Right. And I liked seeing that. And then once I realized what they were doing, but I even liked Root's reaction to it where he sits there and he points to the blood on his head. He's like, hey, this is cop's blood on me. You know, this ain't shampoo in my hair. And I like seeing that finally we see this passionate reaction to him. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty good. And then it was another thing where as I'm thinking, I'm like, wait a minute. That passionate reaction wasn't about the death of the cops. That passionate reaction was they were calling him a liar. And he was, defending himself, not what actually happened. Root was trying to put blame somewhere else. He was trying to deflect it off of him, why he didn't pick up his gun, why he was still probably unarmed at this point in time. I like seeing, it was just... my initial reading, initial reaction, then as you read through it the second time, you see, no, wait a minute, this is what they're trying to tell. And that was something about this character that, as I said before, I hated him initially, then as read-throughs and all that, I really started liking the usage of this character and just so over-the-top, extreme, emotional responses I was getting from this guy. Because, he had the passion, he finally had the passionate flare-up, but he had the passion the wrong way. It was towards himself.
It is interesting how, when we're taking a look at all this, and you talked about touched in the head. When he starts bringing up the story of what happened to Hugo's boy.
Oh, God.
The 12 gauge because he worshipped Kurt Cobain. This, at the time when this came out, that was a very contemporary thing to bring into a comic. I'm like, whoa, we're bringing this in. It was a very today issue. At the moment, I'm like, wow, they're bringing this in cutting edge. And it did fit a kid at that time to have followed through with that. So it was interesting, and wow, it's funny, when he's talking about his son and the rap, and he's like, when I look at this, all of a sudden my kid doesn't seem so bad, and he shows for the first time the picture of Hugo's kid, and we get to see it on the next page.
I love the layout of that.
Yeah.
I thought that was just a great thing because we see this reaction to this FBI agent going, huh? And then you had to physically turn the page to actually see this image of this kid. And I tell you, I was like, wow. But one of the things that got me from Meeker's story when he was telling the FBI agent, talking about how our buddy Root was trying to, man up his son, and he wasn't just yelling or grounding him or smacking him around. He was putting out cigarettes in his arm.
Right.
And that was something I was like, oh my God, this guy's just an SOB. That was, once again, I was just like, this is a coward who is hiding behind his badge. And once, you see that, that's just... there's a line that, you don't cross. And there's a lot of times in a lot of these small towns and a lot of, actually not even in small towns, in close-knit communities, people will look the other way on some stuff. They'll let things slide, and you got a guy, who's a little bit, over the top with the kid. You're like, okay, let it slide. Putting cigarettes out in the arm goes beyond
and all the kid
letting
wants
it slide.
Is something that he never got, Dad's love.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting there because it's something... everyone can relate to that there's somebody that they wanted the attention of or that they wanted love from or they wanted something from. You can relate to this kid. And it is later on he turns into a very Batman story, but where he becomes kind of the Batman of this series, but in a twisted sort of way. Yeah. But it is funny how this kid, you immediately can sit there and you can't help but like him.
I felt so bad
because he had a one shot too.
Yeah.
That was just
I want to read his as well.
Oversized one shot that was just brilliant.
I feel so bad for this kid, and as the story goes on, I feel even more for him. I was reading this, going, man, I wish Jesse could do something for him. There's these celestial powers out there. Why can't one of them help this kid out? He needs just a little bit of help.
And now we see Jesse and Tulip trying to deal with the aftermath of all this, and he was thinking that she came to Anvil to find him. She had no clue he was even there. So he's naturally just assuming one thing, or actually hoping probably one thing and finding something else. But they've got to deal with the aftermath of what has happened to him, which is particularly crazy. I love how Cassidy comes in with a joke every so often, though, when they're talking about Genesis. But Genesis, that makes you think more of creation, birth, or of the book of the Bible, or a terrible band. Just great. And Cassidy, just at that moment, I couldn't resist. He's that guy. And those moments, that reads so true, because who wouldn't, imagine, like, you're falling asleep in the back of the car. You wake up and you hear this conversation going on. And that is a typical buddy thing to do. You pop up and lighten the mood, which was very somber at this point, with a quick little one-liner in hopes of just, relaxing everybody and becoming a part of that conversation then.
And keeping with the buddy thing to do, I loved what Jesse did to him, where they're sitting there talking about what the word is. And he goes, stand on your head. And you see Cassie just sit and stand on his head. Then he stops, like, okay, that was funny. Don't do it again. I love the moment between the two of them, that it was just, if one of us had that power to do that, we would be doing stuff like that all the time to each other, and we would sit there like, okay, this is no longer funny. It kind of reminds me of
it would go too far really fast.
Well, it's you think about what when we're at the cons or whatnot, and I hear, Jim, tell me a story. I'm like, no, it's that same style. Only thing is, he made him stand on his head, and
but it did. That's what reads true about it. They're very well written, where their dialogue feels very natural. Like, this is something, there's always rumors of this going to television and possibly being HBO.
HBO would be wonderful.
This, if it doesn't happen, there's something really wrong. Because this is so serious. And I agree, HBO, I think, would be the ideal. It's always been rumored for HBO. I don't know what takes so long to get this type of thing going. But the script, and one of the rumors was in one of the discussions that they were told the script is right here. Yeah, I agree with it.
Yeah, I saw the one article where they're talking about it. The guy who's pushing for it walked into the writer's room, put down the comic, said, "Here's your script.
Right.
Just go with this. We already have it. We just got to adapt it." And I was just like, yes, that would be outstanding.
Jesse, though, had to go to some internal dialogue at this point. He had to get away from everything and really kind of look at this objectively himself. And this is where he goes to, again, his John Wayne. And I love that, even though we look at it as that's his John Wayne, the face is always obscured. It's in the shadows, so you don't really see whose face that is, who that's supposed to be, and that's something that I thought was a very good technique and tool for utilizing this character.
Yeah, and it was funny because as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, are they doing that because they didn't want to pay likenesses of John Wayne, because they're using the Duke and John Wayne. They're using
likenesses.
Yeah, likenesses. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But as we see later on, when we learn more about who the character is, I'm willing to bet that we are eventually going to see John Wayne's face, and it's going to be somebody else other than John Wayne in there. Because I got ideas and theories as to who John Wayne is in all this.
I don't want to say anything
because
I'm not going to say anything because
you've seen it. I don't know. I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's something that's developed throughout the series, and it's like I said, there's nothing that's wasted. There's things that you want to know that are paid off, and I'm not just talking about with this. It's one of the great things about this book is as things are introduced, they're paid off. There is an art. That's why I said with Saint of Killers, I wasn't spoiling anything by telling you that. I'm saying that about everything in this series. Everything has a beginning, middle, and ending throughout the series at various points where it fits. Some things are things that don't pay off till the very end. But the journey is so cool. This is very epic in its scale. It's very cool that it does feel at the end like one big, huge story. And we see Tulip and Cassidy in there, and their relationship is one that I find incredibly interesting.
Yeah, he is just just the right proper bastard that I love this guy. He is just the little digs, the little kind of jabs and barbs that he was giving to her throughout this whole shopping trip was absolutely wonderful, because it wasn't out and out, attack on her. It was still keeping it
teasing.
It's teasing, yeah, definitely.
And that's why I said that there's, it was. I remember when I read this through, I remember distinctly what my feeling was with what was going on with him. Like, he genuinely likes and respects Jesse as a friend, and that friendship is drastically important to him. But he's teasing Tulip like he's got a thing for her. Probably would not really admit it. If you'd asked him, he might not even be able to describe it. But the behavior is very genuine, like somebody who is teasing. And I know that only because I've done that before. Yeah. It's one of those things that you just, there's an attention that you put on somebody. Because you're right, he's not being mean. He's poking a little fun, paying a little attention, doing his little thing. he is teasing about it, but he's not going so far that it's cruelty.
He's not sticking the knife and twisting it. It's little fun stuff. And
right. And that's one of the things that I really like about it. But she knows Jesse so well that she knows what kind of outfit that Jesse wants from top to bottom. Is there a leather goods store in the mall? And, all that type of thing. So she's going to multiple different stores to get his look together. And
well, I like the fact that, she was giving some jabs back to him. As she's asking, like, is there a leather store? She goes, hey, is there a place I can buy gasoline and a match? Basically saying she's going to torch the dude, which I kind of chuckled at. I was like, okay, she's going back and forth with the guy. And he, one of the things I really liked where he was sitting there talking about how people in love don't keep secrets from each other. And just, he kept going on with that and even went into the singing Stand By Your Man.
Right. The whole thing is just a riot and a half. But even to the point where she picks up those little tips of the shirt collars. Because I got to tell you, that is one of the things I'm going to say consistently about Jesse's outfit. I remember when I first saw the first preview image of this book before it was released. And you saw the picture of Jesse, which became, I'm going to say it's an iconic image. For anybody that read Preacher, it's like, whoa, Jesse Custer has got a very definitive look. They made an action figure out of it. DC directed a Vertigo line of action figures where there's Tulip, Cassidy, Jesse, Saint of Killers. I'm almost positive. The people the usual suspects you would expect. But I know it's definitely Tulip, Jesse, and Cassidy. I can't imagine them not doing Saint of Killers, though, because who wouldn't? Yeah. If you're buying that set, you want Saint of Killers. But the Jesse figure, when you look at it and the whole thing, his whole look with the things on his collars and that whole presence, it's very much dark, very much old Western, you plop a cowboy hat on his head and you've got the complete look. And you run him into town and he is a modern day gunslinger. And I love that about him.
Yeah, I can imagine at cons there was probably a lot of preachers walking around when this was out.
Oh, I can definitely imagine that. Yeah, it's probably one of those characters that still generates a lot of cosplay. I'm sure like at a San Diego or something like that as it comes out because it's a cool character. And it's very interesting on the whole thing. But now we go back to, of course, and the reveal that not only do we have a hierarchy there, but there's this group called the Grail. And, it's covert. And that you can't trust, no matter what level you're working at as an angel, you can't trust your people that you're working with. And I don't know for sure that he's 100% sure that he was one working with the Grail, but he was paranoid enough about it.
And he sent the guy.
That he sent him to Saint of Killers because, first of all, he didn't want to do it himself. But also, second of all, that he thought that he was a snitch or that he was, on the inside.
He's a double agent.
Right.
He's a rat. Get rid of the rat.
Where he could have just been quirky.
I
think that's
unlucky.
I think that's justification for sending a quirky fella into his death. Now we go back and we see Jesse in his garb. It is interesting that he chooses still to wear the priest collar. Yeah.
It's you think about just what we know about his past. He didn't choose the preacher life, but he is the preacher, and I think it's one of those things where he's starting to evolve and come into terms with who he is and what he is and why he is now. And he's probably looking at everything that's all the nasty stuff that happened to him as the life lesson to prepare him for what he's facing now. Because there is some religious belief in there. There is some faith in him, and he's trying to sort out the craziness right now.
It is funny how when they're at the bar and he's got to pay for the tip, and he uses Tulip's money to pay for the tip. Yeah. Which is honestly you have to do that anyway. It's a class thing to do. But he didn't even ask her. Just offered up her money. I mean, it just goes to show that. And she literally, that fumes her because he was clearly doing a little bit of flirting there. It gave the little bit of the smirk, the Jesse look. Probably the look that he's given her many a time.
Probably gave
worked on her, yeah.
The little Texas drawl, darling kind of thing there.
Right.
You on, darling. You keep that now.
So he's back in the, and he's like, I didn't know it was your last $5 and all that. It wouldn't have mattered if she had $7,000 in her pocket still. The issue was that he gave it to her. He didn't ask. He totally broke protocol. But that's, he's a guy, he's a traditional guy's guy. And just doesn't know any better. That's just who he is. So he's in the doghouse again, which leads to him and Cassidy getting into a fight over his little comments to Mona.
Yeah, I laughed my head off because it was just another one of those red shirt moments where I knew something bad was about to happen. I didn't think he was going to unveil the word. I still didn't know, really about Jesse until the scene we get to. And I mean Cassidy. But I was expecting, like, something else was going to happen. And I was expecting, like, firebolts or lightning or something like that fly out of Jesse's hand. Just seeing these two come out of the bar like, okay, we're going to throw down. Now I was like, oh, God, this is not going to end well for these dudes. They are toast.
But I love the fact that Cassidy's contribution to the whole thing is to egg the whole thing on.
Yeah.
Because Jesse's having a conversation right there, and he's trying to apologize, Relax, I ain't interested, I was joking, okay? And the guy's still edging it up at this point. But all of a sudden, Cassidy comes in and goes, I think the problem is that she isn't his girl, and neither's anyone else come to think of that. I mean, just totally egg this whole thing on, and these two... It's clear that Jesse has gotten into many fights from just this sort of situation, and Cassidy just eggs it out. And the two of them are having fun here. I loved this moment because it's so much 80s action film, this fight sequence.
Yeah.
It reads like Two Buddies, Lethal Weapon, whatever you want to call it. Any of those type of movies where you've got, Gibson and Glover, going at it and winding up in these situations and joking around all the way through. It read so much that way for me. It was awesome. At the end of the story, we find out that Cassidy gets stabbed in the eye, and he comes back and, something the matter as he's chewing the guy's neck.
Rip the throat open.
First indication that Cassidy is, in fact, a vampire.
Yeah.
And did you see that coming?
No, actually, I was really shocked. I was surprised. I knew there was something supernatural about him. Mm-hmm. There was just something sitting out there, but it never dawned on my head that they'd go with vampire. I was thinking, I didn't know what I was thinking, really.
I think I knew at the time because of the previews when they'd done the interviews leading up to it, because that's what drew me in. I'd read stuff about this book beforehand that really, and I'm trying to remember what magazine it was that I had read, because there was a couple of them out at the time. And there was an interview about Preacher, and they were talking about it, because it wasn't in the day where you would necessarily go to the internet to find out. There was comic magazines that had preview interviews saying, like, hey, here's this book, and here's what it's all about, and this is what they're going to be doing. And, I'm almost positive they revealed in there that one of them was a vampire. So I think I did know at this point, but the way that they were... Anyway, whether you knew or not.
Just a look on his face like, what? Something matter?
Right.
Just very nonchalant.
So matter-of-factly. Yeah. That's who he is. Just a great ending to the second issue.
The teaser, though, was something that made me crack up. He's like, next issue, interview with a bastard. I was like, oh, nice. Instead of the interview with the vampire, I was like, outstanding.
Holy caffeine!
As I mentioned at the beginning, halfway through, I wanted to do a quick stop and do our contest reveal. The first thing, we picked out our winner. Anybody who provides anything for our website, whether it's blogs or it's Where's Whatnot Now's, articles, sketches from conventions, pictures, whatever, anything that you provide that you add, we enter you into our ongoing contest to pick somebody who's going to pick our next book. Well, Kent Hare is the winner that we chose, and I'll be emailing Kent this week, and we'll be deciding on what our next book's going to be after Preacher. But, Jim, also, we had a Ragdoll of the Whatnot contest.
Yeah.
And it was really creative. In this one, we had 6 different people, but there was tons of entries. Jim and I kind of realized we were going to pick a grand prize winner and then 2 each. We realized because it was 6 people that we were just going to say that every one of them is a winner. Our grand prize winner is Eli with his song.
Yeah,
that was the one we both universally agreed that we totally shocked us, surprised us. We're laughing like crazy. That song was awesome.
Dude, man, you get a for that one.
Yeah, so
outstanding.
And you're going to win a trade paperback of your choice on me. Thank you very much, Eli, for sending that in. But it was funny. You had your 2 favorites, and what were your 2s? You want to share what they were? You had Mike Sims.
Mike Sims. Mike Sims had the 2 great ones there. That was just outstanding. I really liked what he did with the Ragdoll, the Whatnot, just that completely just messed up kind of conglomeration that really fits
Dame Jim.
Yeah.
But also the one that he played off of the song then.
Yeah,
afterwards.
that was
that's going to
something
be up on the website as of when people are hearing this, his latest entry, which he was motivated by the song Frank and Jim.
Yeah, Frank and Jim was another one I was like, outstanding.
Or Jim Furter.
Right, yeah. And then my other one was the Preacher of the Whatnot.
Bobby Bryant.
Yeah, that was and it's a great drawing, so, and it was a nice playoff. We're doing Preacher, but...
I also, he Amazing Man.
Yeah.
And he also did, it was funny, I had him down too, not knowing that you were going to do it, and I figured if we overlapped, we would just pick somebody else, but I had him down for Composite Sean.
Yeah.
Because I had that discussion on the show where I'm like, well, I'm a Batman guy, but I'm also a Superman guy and all that.
Yeah.
And it is true that I'm feeling very much that way right now, because his drawing of that
that was spot on.
Yeah, he drew a great drawing of me as Composite Sean. I thought that was very cool. And Donald Ferguson did this, Whatever Happened to the Cape Crusader.
Yes.
Which it was you holding a cape. And it was funny, at first when I saw it, I just saw you as Alfred.
Yeah.
And then when I took a look at it again, I'm like, wait a minute, that's my face in the cowl.
Yeah, I know.
Which was great. So they were all great, but I also want to shout out Jared Cardos and Jody Phillips.
Yeah.
Jody did the story and Jared Cardos did you as Power Girl. And, so we had 6 entrants, and I'm like, you know what? It was very cool they all participated, because I wanted this to be a funny contest. And there was so many entries from 6 people. There's a ton of entries on the site from them that they just kept kind of fishing them in, that we just thought that it would be best that we choose that grand prize winner and just award everybody and say thank you very much for participating in a very funny contest. I had the advantage of, I was getting these as they were coming in, and I got to tell you, there were days, this time of the year for a school teacher is, we start getting into report cards and grading papers and all that. I adore my job, but it's just high-stress time. We all have, in whatever career you've got, you know what it's like. To have those things coming in, I was laughing like crazy.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you very much for everybody for participating. It was a fun contest. Jim, as we're looking at issue 3 when it opens up, we talked about how great it was to see Cassidy. And I'm looking over this. You know what I love? That you actually see the victim in his eyes, in the glasses.
Yeah.
That reflection there, just Glenn Fabry. It's funny, I did the ad for the covers, because I don't have that Preacher Covers book. But I did that on purpose because I try to pick things for the ad that either I own, that I love, or that I see on the site that I'm genuinely interested in getting, because I'm like, okay, if I'm going to do an ad, I'd rather point people to things that I think are really cool that I'd like to purchase, because it's good for them. They get the same discount and all that. So I do that on purpose, for that reason. And this is one of those covers are amazing. This is the guy who's doing the covers on Magog right now.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And it's particularly just a great looking. I love
and
Cassidy.
that was a cover about it. I missed that the first time. It wasn't until I was looking at this. Yeah, this is really cool. When I was rereading it for this, that I saw that, I was like, oh wow, that's nice.
We're taking a look right now, and the Adelphi are just getting more and more
human,
bitter, more and more angry.
They're angry drunks, man. They're angry drunks.
Are they getting more and more human because God has left heaven? Has his lack of presence there caused there to be more humanity in heaven? Is that how you're reading this? Or are you reading that this is the way the hierarchy always was? Is it falling apart because God has walked away?
There's no leadership. There's no structure. There's no being for them to look up to. There's no...
So their purpose is
emulate.
They're lost.
They're lost souls now, and it's and in a way, you think about what is humanity, what is mankind. We are just creatures that are dealing with what has been presented to us in the best way we know how. Well, sometimes we lose our way. That's one of the strengths of a religion, in that it gives you that faith that there's something else out there. It gives you that purpose, that being, that kind of calmingness when the craziness starts happening. Well, now the angels don't have that. They had a direct connection to this wonderfully calming influence that was that, as I said, it's a perfect light, a perfect love, a perfect light that's that warm glow. It's now gone. So now they're dealing with this stuff, and probably for the first time since creation, they don't have this comforting feeling. And, we see them throwing back a couple drinks. They're the bitter drunk type kind of guys. They're not happy drunks. And it's, they don't know how to probably... they may not even have had emotional ranges like this before. We don't know exactly what heaven was like before. All we see is now the current ramifications going on. And I like the fact that we are delving into that. On the surface, it could just be kind of a funny story, but the fact that, we both thought the same things, is it because there's a lack of God there, kind of is a cool, statement on what they're trying to tell. Because maybe the Seraphi aren't as nasty and vicious when God is around.
There's guilt here, too, for DeBlanc. Because DeBlanc's trying to justify what he did. He basically led his fellow Delphi to slaughter, and Saint of Killers is trying to make it say this is right because he was a spy and all that. And the other guys come back and saying, he was a crystal clean guy. He wasn't a spy at this point.
Yeah,
what are you saying?
He was one of us. He was a good guy.
Yeah, and he deserved it for being a little crawler and all that. It just, there is no justification for this. He's just in the wrong, and I think he's protesting too much. He knows that.
Yeah, and he's hiding behind. He's hiding in the bottle to try to. You either deal with the problem, you deal with your emotions, or you hide from it. You run from it. He's running from it now. It could be because he's not used to dealing with these emotions, or it could be that he's a jerk. I don't know who he was before this, and they always say that. In a lot of times in adversity and in trying times, you really start to see someone's true personality. Are they rise up to the occasion and be the inspirational leader, or are they the weasel backstabber? Right now, we're seeing a bit of a weasel backstabber from him, and even later on, as this goes, it continues to build. And it's one of those curious things about who this guy is, that are we seeing this negative stuff because of there is no God? Are we seeing this presence because he's a jerk? What is the cause of it? What came first, chicken or the egg? Yeah, it is.
I love the analogy. It's cool. I got an equally strange analogy. When we see Cassidy and Jesse here with Tulip, and Jesse's reaction to first realizing what Cassidy is, it reminded me of there was a multi-parter on Doctor Who where they brought back the Master, and the Doctor realized Captain Jack Harkness from Torchwood was drastically changed due to events with the Doctor involving the Daleks, where his body chemistry was changed. He died, but then came back, and because of that whole situation, he became something no longer human in the true sense, and something that creeped out the Doctor, which, considering all the alien races he's seen and things like that, you would think that it wouldn't. In many ways, almost an abomination, a freak of nature to the Doctor. So I was looking at that, and I'm like, and their relationship throughout those storylines led to something where the Doctor had to completely change his mind, very similar to what goes on with Jesse and Cassidy here. And it's funny, I'm like, how am I making a Doctor Who connection to Jesse and Cassidy here? But it actually fit. It was interesting. But he's taking a look at what Cassidy's doing here, and Jesse is not even putting completely together yet that he's a vampire. He's like, what did you do that for?
Yeah, it's hold on, wait a minute, sleep all day under tarp, stay out of the sunlight. Oh yeah, and feeding on humans. Wait a minute, okay, you're a vampire. It's just slowly piecing together. And I laughed because, with the crazy stuff they've already seen to this point, this is something they're not latching on. This is something they have disbelief in. Dude, you got a half angel, half demon sitting inside you, and you got a problem with a vampire. What's going on there, man?
But again, they're just talking with Tulip and Jesse, about that pistol again. And while they're doing that, Cassie did it as a distraction so he can go back to his snack, his Lunchable. And he's chewing on that guy's neck. And, Jesse just, again, the word again, tell him to stop. And Cassidy told him once before never to do that again, and he's crossed that line, especially at a moment where Cassidy, because of the fact that he's hurt, needs this. His eye was stabbed. Yeah. So he needs this to recover. And I'm immediately getting the impression that Cassidy's not fully healed yet from what happened to him.
No, he still needs some time.
Right. And because of that now, and he's been told and here's the thing, I don't think that upset Cassidy as much as the fact that now he's been told that he's an abomination by a guy. He can't explain his respect for Jesse, but right here there has become like a brotherhood between the two of them. Jesse is someone he respects. Jesse is someone he wishes he could be because of the way he carries himself. Not saying that he doesn't want to be a vampire, but he wants to be the kind of guy that Jesse is. And he wants Jesse to look at him as a kindred spirit.
Yeah.
And there is that moment there where there's this connection that this is somebody he's looking up to and saying, this is the kind of guy I want as a friend. Maybe this is the guy that Cassidy always wished he could have had as a friend. And this is an opportunity to have that. And now that's being shoved back into his face. And Cassidy's just kind of like, fine, I'm out of here. There we go.
It definitely was just the comments. And once again, it's the art sequence in that where he's calling down Abomination. And you just see that kind of that stoic silence on Cassidy as he's just like, you know, you could, if you could reach into his mind, you can probably think he's like, did he just call me that? You know, and it's just like that shock and just stutter and just awe of the fact that this is somebody he has as bud. He says, this is my mate, this is going to be my friend, and he completely misjudged the guy. And he's like, you know, that way, for me, it was probably one of the bigger things because Cassidy lives on that judgment of that, making that split-second decision. He's been around for as long as the century's been around. He's been around for a little bit. So 100 years, you know. He's learned to read people. He's learned to understand who people are. And he had Jesse in this one picture. It had this, you know, character representative, and right there that completely threw it off. And that for me was that emotional reaction. He's like, I gotta go. I gotta get out of here.
Now, looking over here at the Saint of Killer segment, this is really pivotal to me because it's funny how this leads into a later sequence because, first of all, you boys mind me listening to your radio spell. If they had walked away there, I think they might have lived.
Oh, yes, definitely. Even after he shoots the first red shirt, you know, he tells the other one, hey, if you don't go for your gun, there's not going to be a massacre here.
Right.
You go for that gun, there's going to be a massacre.
And I love that because when he means massacre, I don't know at that point, once the one guy went for his gun, I think that one deputy was dead. Both of them. I think he might have killed both of them. I think what he's saying at this point, though, is it's not just going to be you now. If you go for that iron, it's going to be a massacre. And we see what he ends up doing, regardless of maybe he wouldn't have killed him. But
I kind of
would have either stopped at
he would have stopped at that
deputy,
second sheriff, yeah,
or maybe not touched him at all. Either way, where he goes with this is like, whoa. And I love the way he describes it later, but we'll have to talk about it when we get to that point. But before we can even get to that, now we see these guys were interviewing Root, and they're starting to realize that there
is a fourth suspect. I like how the one comment it even said, the fourth suspect. He realized that Root was telling the truth, that there is this killing machine, it is one of the things that it really kind of like made me feel better about the fact that there wasn't this huge APB out on the Saint of Killers, because they really didn't understand it. They didn't believe him. They didn't think there was this fourth guy. Now they know, oh crud, Root was telling the truth. There really is this killing machine out there.
Now I want to hear this story again and actually listen to it this time, which is particularly interesting. But poor Sheriff Root's at home, and that poor kid, I guarantee you this is their home experience every night. He rambles on all night long. Sure wish we could get the TV. They're sitting in front of a TV that does not operate, not talking.
Yeah.
The only entertainment they could possibly have is talking, and he prefers to ignore his son and look at the television that doesn't work to talking to his son.
Yeah, this sequence, you know, when I realized exactly just what a SOB this guy is, you know, from before we knew he was this nasty, for him to do this, you know, he's got his son just throw the kid a bone, man. Look at him, get over.
To tell you how much he's ignoring his son, he is so paying attention to everything else but his son. He was able to feel the vibrations of the phone, catch the ring before it even started. You know, one of those, which, I mean, you can do that with a telephone. You can already tell, like, especially with certain kinds of phones, that, okay, it's ready to ring or something like that. Maybe hear a phone in the other room. I know our cordless phone, for example, our regular wired phone rings a couple of seconds beforehand, and then you can see like our cordless phone light up before we get any ringing or anything like that. So it's clear that Root was so not paying attention to him that he knew the phone was going to ring, because his son makes the comment, I didn't even hear it ring. Yeah. and just so excited to be with Dad. You know, he's hearing Dad say all these things that he sneaks into the car following behind him.
Yeah, and I tell you, when I saw that, I was initially thinking things were going to get really bad. And I was worried that something bad was going to happen to that kid because, like, that poor kid, I really feel bad for him. And it's one of those, he's another one of those over-the-top characters that, would we really have this type of reaction? If someone put a shotgun underneath their chin and pulled the trigger, it would really mess up the body. But constructive surgery, plastic surgery, they'd probably be able to reassemble somewhat of a face. Like, we have the kid where he can't talk. He does talk, but his mouth is his whole jawline, his whole facial structure is messed up, that it just comes across as the mumbling. And they have the translation in the word dialogue next to it, that you need to read to understand what he said. But would there actually be, in reality, this bad of a situation? I don't think so. I think plastic surgery has come to the ways where we wouldn't have this, but the fact that they have this character in there isn't just a direct representation of this kid who's deformed.
Would it depend on where the bullet went, though?
You think about it, they can do a complete reconstruction of a jaw. Think about that lady who's in the Cleveland Clinic right now. She had like most of her face ripped off, by a crazy chimpanzee attack. They're rebuilding her face. And
how long has that been in place, though, compared to when this story was told?
I don't know. I really don't know.
We're going back to the early 90s.
I think, though, if you look at what's wrong with the kid, really it's the jawbone that's kind of messed up and the upper mandible type thing that can be fixed. So both of those, I think, could be fixed. I think, but I'm not 100% certain. But the key is, though...
How much of that does insurance cover?
Well, they said earlier that he had 6 operations.
So, obviously, insurance
So there's something.
There
was something going on.
Right.
But... it was one of those things where I was thinking initially it's just like kind of like an extreme character, but it's more of like an extreme, I want to say extreme representation of just that, that bad parenting, bad father-son relationship that, as you said, we all had somebody that we tried to get the attention of. Here's this kid who's trying to get the attention of his dad, but he doesn't have the voice to do it. He doesn't have the physical thing. And how many times, you think about, have you not been able to? Right.
And Dad making him as insecure as he is.
Yeah.
He's ultimately doomed to become as insecure as his father, unless something drastically changes him.
Yeah, we see something drastic. Oh.
Yeah. But, I mean, that is one of the things. Now, this bit with Jesse and Tulip at the motel. See, Jesse keeps asking her about the gun and what's going on with that, and she keeps coming back to him becoming a minister. Now, here's the difference. Jesse right now is not able to and not ready to tell her why and what led him down that path. And we know why from later issues. But the interesting thing here is, do you agree with me on this, Jim? I think Tulip wants to open up to him about why she has that gun. She's only holding it over him because she desperately needs to know
why he left her. Yeah.
But I do get the impression with her that she would love in an instant
for
them to both throw everything out on the table. Let's connect here. Go ahead and tell me your story. And that's all she's waiting for in order for them to connect again.
Yeah, she doesn't want in a way, she doesn't want to be the first one, but she really wants that release. This is something that's just weighting her down, and she wants to be open and honest, and a lot of it, there's a lot of inner guilt in her probably over what she's done, what she became when he left.
But she also wants the comfort of being able to trust him enough to be honest with him and know that it's going to be okay. And to know that whatever he's going through, that he's willing to make himself vulnerable to tell her.
Yeah.
And to just come to an understanding. And I think if she could honestly believe that he would promise to tell her, she would tell him first, just for the purpose of saying, okay, if you're really going to tell me, let me tell you, this is what's going on, and here's what it was, and this is why I had to get to that part. Now fill me in on your end, and that's all she wants. She wants to desperately connect with him. You can feel the tension between the two of them. There's a genuine love there, and I think he wants to tell her, but he also feels that to tell her
would put her in harm's way.
Yes,
and it's that. When we see why he doesn't tell her, and that for me was just a great story that played out. That he wasn't really being a son of a gun by not telling her. He was really trying to protect her and trying not to expose her to this really nasty situation. And that was something that when he finally tells her, and you can see just her understanding why he did it. It's It
is the interesting thing about reading this now after knowing what happens in the later issues, though. Because you sit in that moment, you read this, and I'm like, I read this totally differently now. I'm seeing in this moment, this guy really loves her. He loves her enough that he's willing to risk the end of the relationship or risk her. Like, he could have, honestly, if he opened up completely at this moment, he could have her. But he's more interested in protecting her than he is.
It's not about the conquest.
It's not what's better for him.
It's better for her. Yeah.
And I love that. That moment, I'm like, he really loves her enough to sacrifice any possibility of anything happening then.
This is, we said it earlier. This is just a great love story that just unfolds, and it's funny that I'm sitting there going, man, that's awesome. It reminded me of, the date movie type thing where you see that and you're just like, come on, kiss already, kiss. Oh, you did it. Oh. And it tugs at your heartstrings,
but when
man.
you get in those situations, it's very true that you're going to start saying the wrong things. You're going to say dumb things. You're going to say hurtful things to each other because you're so emotionally wound up at that point. It's emotional frustration. There's all kinds of pent-up tension in this whole thing. And now they're saying just horrible things to each other based on that one. It's a roller coaster. Yeah. They went down a wrong turn on a roller coaster. It's crazy.
I usually warn people, like if I'm going on a first date with someone, I'll warn them that odds are I'm going to say at least one, possibly two really stupid things. I'd appreciate if you would ignore it. Because it's just, you get caught up in just, you're kind of, either you're trying to impress somebody and you just stumble and you trip on your tongue and you're just like, blah, blah. Oh, did I just say that out loud? That is really stupid, Jim. And it's that same kind of emotional roller coaster.
It's funny that you say that because I do the same thing. When I'm going out on a date, I usually say, if you meet my friend Jim, he's going to usually say one thing.
No, I knew that one was coming.
Sorry. But Cassidy now, he's so upset at this point, and angry. But this is a part where there's moments where you're like, okay, I've had enough of Cassidy. I'd like to see Cassidy gunned down by the Saint of Killers. I'd like to see him run over by a bus or anything like that. But then you see certain moments like this where Cassidy goes in. He's got there's a natural curiosity as far as what's going on. And he walks in and sees the Saint of Killers. And he realizes at this point that he could either throw Jesse under the bus or he could protect his friend. Yeah. He just got into a fight, and there's already a relationship built here that's strong enough that he's willing.
He's going to throw down. And I like, earlier we did see that Jesse was starting to feel guilty what he said about Cassidy. And Cassidy's feeling guilty, like, we're under emotional strain. And as he's trying to make, Cassidy was making rationale in his mind as he got to this bar that, his mate's under a lot of pressure. I can understand why he lashed out. And then when he sees the Saint the Killer's like, hey, you rat him out, I'll let you live. And he's like, not going to happen. And I ate that up, that it's, it's the code of conduct, just that you don't rat out your friends. And, wow.
The coin is very telling, though. The Saint of Killers drops a coin on the table from 1878.
Yeah.
Which says a whole lot about that story.
And I liked how with another thing, and just Cassidy confirms that Saint the Killer would have let those people live. That was a great thing. He sits there and he said that keeping a promise to the fella outside. Yeah, and even the artwork, there's a subtle, you look at that other sheriff when when Cassidy walks up on him, you can see his gun is out of the holster in his hand. So that sheriff did reach for his gun, he did try to clear holster, and he got gunned down in the process. So I like those little subtle art pieces and just a little bit of story on it that, it's a subtle bit, but it still tells the complete story. I think that's why I think that sheriff would have lived. Had he not drawn on the Saint of Killer, he would have lived, and all those people in that bar would have lived as well.
Because he was so offended. The Saint of Killers was so offended with what Jesse did.
He was only after Jesse. He's no longer out for blood.
Right. So it is interesting. Now we go back to seeing, of course, Jesse and Tulip, and imagine seeing that. You're looking for your own reflection. It's just a burning blaze.
Yeah,
that would creep you out too.
A little bit freaky.
Right. And Tulip doesn't totally understand completely what's happening with him yet, but I love that even though this insanity is going around, she's willing to listen, which is the opposite of what Root was going through. When Root was telling his crazy story, nobody would listen to him because they think he's crazy nuts. But Jesse's telling the story, and this shows, again, the difference between relationships. Tulip's like, okay, tell me. let's go through and tell this whole thing. And he's going through and telling her the whole story of what happened with...
Yeah, who is Genesis, the creation? We, of course, get our confirmation that it is 100% a demon and an angel. But it's the neat thing about what Genesis is. Genesis is something new. It's a new idea, a new concept. It's and even Tulip's
it's
like
creating life from lifelessness.
Yeah.
Oh wait, sorry.
Yeah, that's Star Trek.
Sorry.
Nice.
The Genesis device. Khan. I've seen Star Trek 2
way too many times, man. It's outstanding though. But it's even Tulip tries to say, what is it, good and evil together? But it's not even just good and evil in one location. It is just a new being, a new thought process, something that they didn't know would exist and could exist. And because of that, that's what's got everybody so scared. This is a new idea. This is a new thought process. But it's not only just a new thought process, but this is a new idea to God. Mm-hmm. And that is the huge thing.
But it talks about the insanity here, too, of how people deal with when races mix. And just how, like, this, so far, they did not know what could Genesis have been if they embraced it. Could have been something totally different. It could have brought the angels and the demons together, maybe, and changed the whole landscape. But instead, out of fear, it totally, God left heaven. It's... look at the humanity there. What was it like? I would love to see what was it like before all this happened. What was it like before this went down? And it destroyed. So it is funny. It's in many ways it's metaphorical how our own fears can destroy humanity and destroy relations because of just insanity like this. So it is an interesting commentary on race and just how humanity has reacted to race.
Race, just
anything.
anything.
You know what? Take race out of it.
Anything,
any differences between people.
You look at a lot of the current dealings going on with homosexual rights, with different religious groups at each other's throats. There's every type of differences in between two people. And if it's something that they could see or something that they know, and you lash out against the unknown. You lash out against something that is different. And it's what if you embraced it, though? And I love that, just that whole thought process.
How could it be more powerful, right?
Yeah.
And does it have to change you?
It does. Is change a bad thing?
Right.
Is it something that because later on they talk about how it could destroy the world. This something new force.
Could it make the world better?
Maybe it does change the world. Mm-hmm. Maybe it makes it for the better. Maybe this is the beginning of world peace. Maybe this is the unifying factor that could bring us all together. This could be the dogs and cats living together and just the peace of, harmony in the universe. Well, I was almost going into the Ghostbuster rant, and I stopped myself.
I do. I was like, where is he going with this now?
I caught myself. I almost did because that is serious. It is a serious, thought process, and I didn't want to.
It is.
I didn't want to mess it up.
But I mean, it's funny how this book, though, it's so filled with humor, so filled with the bizarre, so filled with all that. When I first read this through, I didn't think any of this. I'm going back when I was reading this monthly. I was like, oh man, this is so cool. It was one of those it was very much like a guy action movie ride. And that's what I got through it from. And I'll be honest, that was my first read through. I wasn't thinking very deep into it or anything like that. It is funny when you go back through and reread something, though, after you've gotten past that, you start looking at different layers that what was meant to be there, what wasn't meant to be there, what are you getting out of it. It is funny how this connects to those type of things. And, of course, the two of them are having big talks about this. And as they're going out the door, they encounter, of course, Hugo Root.
Yeah, I love.
Who did not go in to be interviewed.
Yeah.
He went and okay, if they're not going to believe me, I'm going to bring them in.
Well, and he's like, I'm going to the crime scene where because this hotel was right outside where they gutted the two guys out of the bar. So he went there to examine the situation, and I like that about him, because he's not going to, he doesn't trust what they did, their investigation. He's going to do his own little investigation. He's going to do his own thing. Now, I like that, but I also disliked it because he's a bit of an hole, So, but it was one of those things where it fits his character, it fits his personality. But when when he gets the drop on Jesse, I love the fact that he had the gun up to his head and said, "One word, say one word, and I will spread your brain all over your whore girlfriend." And I thought that was just, he learned from his past mistakes. He knows this guy's got the power to stop him. So he even tries to open his mouth, he's pulling the trigger. And I thought that was a really cool just usage of Hugo Root.
One of the things also we should talk about here is true. Jesse comes to the realization that the one source of information that he really needs at this point is the Saint of Killers.
Yeah.
So he's actually going to seek out this guy to
Yeah.
get information that he needs, because he needs to go after whoever's pulling the strings.
Talk about cojones, man.
Because at this point, there's a certain amount of manipulation and violation of him, and he wants to know what this secret is. What is going on here? And I need to know the whole story. And they know now, the Adefi, or Duff, whatever the name is.
Adefi.
Yeah, Adefi. They know now that Custer knows about the Saint and that he's going after him. So what a great ending to this particular issue.
Yeah, things are about to get, it's about to hit the fan.
We go on to our 4th issue, and we see him right in the face of an angel on that Glenn Fabry cover. It's just wonderful.
Yeah.
Just a great look. And you see the angel just kind of like,
whoa.
because how do you react to that?
Yeah.
And something an angel wouldn't be used to, but it's a great thematic cover to where things are heading and what we all want to see. Now, we get a little bit more of a glimpse into the whole John Wayne scenario here, because we see Jesse as a kid taking a lot of comfort into John Wayne.
He's watching McClintock, which,
Yeah.
by the way, is one of my favorite John
And this was
Waynes.
after Dad had been shot.
Yeah.
So it was not long afterwards. And he found kind of a way to withdraw into this make-believe world that he made for himself and to find some comfort. And we do see later why he would need to escape.
He needs this. Yeah, this
Yeah.
is and it's, well, later on we're going to talk more about it, but it's just like, it is not only just an escape thing. I'm wondering how much of it is really in his mind. Is this something else coming in and helping him? That's the one thing that really popped in my head. And now, I do think there is some of it is in his
I think that's
head.
internally from him, though.
But I don't know if that's one thing I was wondering. Is it completely inside
Or
him?
are there other elements?
Are there other elements out there at play
And
helping
I don't
him?
want to...
Right, and don't... Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's the best part where I've got to get complicated. But there is... I do think what's interesting about this, at least reading it at this stage, without revealing anything, we just talk about what we're seeing at this moment. I do think that it's a normal reaction for something so traumatic as seeing your father killed to withdraw into yourself. And hopefully your mind, as a way of healing itself, tries to construct a scenario.
His partner. This friend and this backup, if you will. This is the guy
what
he's
he
going
hoped
to
would
go
have
to.
been
Right.
there
His this
to
is
save his dad.
Right.
So it is interesting. And then we're taken back, of course, to Hugo Root, where Tulip pulls a gun on him, and Hugo, here at this point, has got nothing to lose. But also, Hugo understands intimidation.
Yeah.
And he understands also fear. And I get the feeling, here's my question to you. If a guy had pulled the gun on Hugo Root, like Jesse, for example, would Hugo Root have turned so quickly around and held his gun up? Or was it because it was a female?
I say purely because of a female.
I agree.
It's because who was holding the gun on him. But though to keep one of the things I really liked is how when he turns the gun on Tulip, he once again reiterates to Jesse, one word, she dies. And that, for me, was just a great read on Hugo's part, knowing that, hey, this guy cares about her. This is somebody special to him. This will keep him in check.
This is funny how Cassidy's talking through everything at this point. Yeah. Dr. Cassidy going through there.
Now, what would you do, Dr. Cassidy? You have a sucking chest wound you have a hole inside your chest. Well, what I need to do is find somebody to bleed and drink and, drain and rest and, get better. What am I going to do? I'm going to drive this straight into the Saint of Killers. I loved just his whole playing through it. Now, part of that, I do wonder if part of that was kind of like, that building himself up, because I know sometimes just throw out there when I'm driving across a bridge. I got to talk myself through it. Yeah.
Because you remember in this case, Cassidy has an option either to get out of the situation altogether and not be a part of it, or does he justify, why am I going back after the way this guy treated me?
Yeah.
And he's going through his head, and this is where he's rationalizing. You talked about, this is the part where he actually says, yes, but careful consideration will reveal that Jesse's not a bad bloke, really, and tempers were pretty heated all round, and the patient doesn't help. He knows he'll feel bad for at least a year. And that is one of those things where we always talk about the show about honesty as far as what would you do in a situation, and do you know 100% for sure that you would step in, that you would man up, and that type of thing. And there's situations where you know that you would, and there's situations where you're like, I'm not sure what I would do here. In these type of situations where you know your conscience is going to go over it, you've got to go and step in at this point. And I'm like with Cassidy on this one, I'm like, I get this. I totally get what Cassidy's doing here, and I'd like to think that I would do that.
Yeah, this is the build-up. You got to sometimes, courage, if you go and just run in, dun-ta-da, look at me, that's easy. If you're sitting there and you are afraid and you got a little bit of fear, but you're able to work through that fear. You're able to push and say, no, I got to do this. I got to do this. Okay, here we go. We're going to take care of this. And he's building himself up. That, for me, is more courageous than the guy who just blindly runs in saying, oh, here I come to save the day. No, it's the cowards who sit there and say, I got to do the right thing. I got to step up. I gotta do this now. And that is, I ate that up because I can see myself. I know I've done stuff like that and I know you've probably done it, and it's a regular human reaction that we're seeing from this vampire whose guts are basically spilling out all over his truck. And I ate that up. That's the contradiction and conflict and just whacking craziness that is Preacher. That it's so just, oh.
Now this is really funny because Hugo Root in his stories, he's realized that they were right about the bullets. Because when Saint of Killers shows up, Tulip immediately stops and pulls the gun back, and Hugo thinks it's because she's afraid of him, when immediately Saint of Killers says, he's not afraid of you, afraid of me. But Hugo has convinced himself in his head that this guy killed a dozen of his people. He miscounted.
Yeah.
When they talked about the two revolvers and all that, only carrying 6 each, he's like, okay, maybe I was wrong on my count. He killed a dozen. And he clarifies that it was 14. So now he's clarified that my guns
aren't going to be enough.
Right.
Yeah, this is it. I'm done, man.
So, but it's funny how Hugo Root here goes, go on and pull them pistols. I've changed my mind. So he wants to stand off again. Is he nuts?
Oh, God,
and it's twice now that Hugo Root has survived death because of outside forces. Because Saint of Killers wanted to kill him twice now.
Yeah. Hugo was in the crosshairs. It was time for him to die.
I love Cassidy's rally cry and everything like that. Cheer up, Preacher Man, you're rescued. And the two of them are just like smiling and smirking and laughing. It's funny, in the worst pain, there's nothing that beats a friend with a quick wisecrack that'll make you, for even that second, forget that you have that pain. Because Jesse's been knocked out.
Jesse's dropped. He's hurt it. Those two, just the little gerbs, the little quirps back and forth on each other. And we said this a couple times. I'm going to keep saying it. This is any other longtime friend. Any friends it's not any. You have to have the little bit of the juvenile, little bit of the sick sense of humor. If you have that type of sense of humor with some friend, this is the kind of stuff you would do. Granted, these are some extreme situations you're dealing with, but it's still, you throw out the humor to lighten the mood. These are both two people who are really hurt and bad right now, and they need to recover. They need to just get that little freshness in their head, and boom, you get that from your friend. You get that from that one little quirk. You get that from that little, oh, come on, please, let's do this, kind of, moments. And I really ate that up.
Now, this is funny. We see right here that Hugo Root is basically going to be done. His son comes running in, trying to save his dad. And it's funny how he's longing. I think he's longing so much for Dad to live because he's hoping that somewhere I could connect with my dad here. If you take him from me now, that's never going to happen. I'm never going to be fulfilled with that. And this is where Jesse steps in.
Now, one of the things I liked right before that, though, you see Hugo Root trying to buy himself some time again. Because, the Santa Killer turns and getting ready to gun him down. And, Hugo's like, hey, he just drove a truck into you. Yeah, I called you out.
Ugly fella there just drove
a truck in you. Why don't you go after him? And Saint's like, I'll get to him, but you first. And I ate that up because that's really, for me, was just the...
because Hugo's trying to save himself.
Yeah, he's trying to, once again, he's trying to figure out a way. Let me see if I can bob and weave.
I just opened my mouth way too much.
Yeah.
And I know it.
Whoops, made a mistake.
I love right here that he's just like, now I'm totally embarrassed because he clutches his head as he's hearing the kid say no.
Yeah, that's another moment where I just really hate this guy because this is his kid who's now running into the face of death, and he's embarrassed by the kid. That kid saved him.
The kid's braver than him.
Yeah, much braver. The kid's trying to do something positive, and we've seen the kid made a mistake. Yes, the attempted suicide, obviously. He shouldn't have done that. The kid knows he made a mistake. He's trying to, make up for the error in judgment that he had. And, what's his kind, wonderful dad do? Just shun him time and time again. Now, I'm thinking, if I'm this killer and I see that this is his kid, I may actually be lenient on the guy. He's got a lot of issues to deal with. He may have a chance if he would have actually been a real father at that moment and tried to protect and make it look like he's trying to protect
both.
What?
The killer would have shot them both.
Yeah, probably.
No. If you saw the story, the killer would have shot them both.
He would have?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. At this point, it was just kind of like, because the decision's been made at that point.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's... the interesting part is when Jesse's standing off with the killer, telling him to put him back in the holsters, and the killer's saying, "I'm going to kill you." Well, maybe someday, but not right now. You see right there that even Cassidy's saying, "If that was me,
those white jeans would be brown."
Yeah, it's one of those moments where it really just goes to show just how dangerous looking the Saint of Killers is, and he needs to get the angels there. He has no choice because he's under the word of God, under this godlike word that he's got, and calling down. This bit, when you turn the page and you see him, "Then behold, O mortals, the glory of the heavenly host." And it's again like Wizard of Oz. Get out from behind that curtain and let me see the reality here. Enough already. And this is where we find out the basic gist of the storyline. DeBlanc has to reveal here that God has just taken a vacation.
Now, I liked how Jesse used the word against the angel.
Right.
Because he sits there and he asked the question, and the angel, the power of the word was tell the truth. That was the part underneath the underneath the power. It wasn't the whole question. I like that he's now controlling it and using it different ways. Like he told Saint to Killer, get them down here. And he used the power against Saint to Killer to pull them down, knowing that he had the power on the killer, so he's going to use this. I like now he's getting more comfortable with it. He's using it. He's actually controlling how he's using it. It's not just a blanket statement. And I thought that was a neat, just to kind of see him develop with the power, but we're going to later see that he still doesn't have a complete understanding of the power.
Yes. And we'll have to talk about that later because I'm trying to wonder what you mean by we're saying we'll see later that he doesn't.
In a couple minutes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's
I know what you're talking about at that point. Yeah. But it is funny that we find out right here that God quit, and I don't know. That's
It's a tough thing because, God left when Genesis was created. Now, did he run because of this new concept that's just as powerful as he did? Is it all part of God's masterful plan? What is the deal going on there? And I liked how, we're now getting this piece, but there's still more of a mystery. And we're going to read later on in this volume that there is even more stuff to be revealed later on about God and what is going on there. I thought, it was a really cool just seeing these reactions to this big news.
I wonder if this isn't what's affecting these angels, though. What were they like before this again?
Yeah.
Because we'll see certain, Jesse says, how can God quit? And he's like, DeBlanc comes back with, that's what I thought. But here we are. He's gone and nothing's changed. No apocalypse, no lion lying down with the lamb, 4 horsemen still in the stable. And he's sitting there like, what is that crisis of faith now doing to the angels, who they believed all these crazy things were going to happen, and none of them did?
Yeah.
So God's quit. He's gone on his walkabout, and nothing has come of it. Nothing that was ever foretold is, so what do we believe in? what is what does any of it really mean? So I don't know.
Yeah,
I would love to see what heaven was like before this.
Yeah, that'd be a cool thing just to get a snapshot of that. Or even just a discussion with the writer, what he thought it would be like beforehand, or it's one of those. There's so much going on outside the page on this on this series that
Really interesting here when you take a look at this is what happened. We find out what happened to Genesis' parents.
Yeah,
that they killed them basically.
They slaughtered them. Yeah, because it's something new
and natural.
Yeah,
and it was totally violating their concept of division. It was
the Seraphim were glad to do it,
right?
Because it's the portrayal of one of their own, and
ashamed.
Yeah,
ashamed was the word that they used, and wow. And so now they're holding and keeping. They were keeping Genesis prisoner for the purpose of just hiding what happened.
Yeah, we talk about change. Is change a good thing? Is change a bad thing? And they're trying to hold back change. You can't truly hold back change. Change is going to happen. Whether we want it to or not. We can sometimes try to guide it, maybe, manipulate it, or even just have a better understanding what's coming down the line. And no matter what, there will be something new down the line. And I like the fact that they offered Jesse the chance, hey, we can take Genesis out of you right now. We can, take this away from you. We'll bring him back up to heaven, and everything will be back to normal. And Jesse's like, no. We're not going to do that because, I know the truth now, but no one will believe me. Mm-hmm. I'm going to make God tell everybody. And I thought that was just a powerful notion.
What would happen to him if he did this? Like, let's say he went with the bargain to give up Genesis. What would they have done to him?
Oh, Santa Killers would have killed him.
Or they would have. I think these angels have been known to kill before. Can they let a human walk the earth who knows this secret?
Oh, he would have been toast. Him, anybody who heard that story would be toast right now. Done. Whether it's Saint or whether it's the angels.
They couldn't let somebody walk around knowing that.
Yeah.
So he's doing, I think, what is the only course of action. I love it. He's manning up and saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to find God. I'm going to make him tell everybody what he did.
Yeah.
He's gonna have to
it's a day of there's a day of reckoning coming,
right.
And he's going to make it happen. And it's one of those things. Once again, another one of those attack on my faith that I can't believe that God would do something like this. But I'm reading this going, if that happened, you get mad. And this is he's just really PO'd at this God who walked away from his duty. He's just because there's something new out there, you ran from it. We got to make you have to be accountable. And one of the things Jesse's always talking about is being accountable for your actions. And just taking ownership of what you've done. God now needs to be accountable for what he did.
Well, I'll be seeing you. I would not want this man in a million years telling me, well, I'll be seeing you.
Yeah, that's once again, we talked about white pants going to brown right there, man. Oh.
This is great. And what he does to Hugo Root here, though, basically tell him, no, we're leaving. And
yeah, basically he told Root to engage in relationships with himself.
But he was telling him in a way that he really meant for him to...
Yeah, just leave him alone.
He didn't mean it for him to take it literally.
Yeah, but it was under the power of the word. So Hugo severed something and then inserted it somewhere. And it got lodged, in his colon. So, and it's funny because it's that whole extreme thing going on that, medically, that's not possible. You think about the item that was severed is only in a position because of blood flow. Once you sever it, it no longer has the blood flow going to it, so he could no longer
I love that you
be
feel
effective.
That, we all need to be educated on this. You thought about this way too long.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Wow. Did that,
you think about it. It's.
I see you with a chalkboard making blueprints up and showing people. Hey, okay, now could object A go into object B? Well, let's find out.
I hopped on the internet. I was like, okay, what do we got now? There's no way. Okay,
Wow.
But
this part here where you're with his son was pretty heart-wrenching
it's
here. You're talking to me. My dad's talking to me. And, whatever you say, Dad, these are the first words you said to me since I shot myself. So it's clear that was you just
Dad's
so
asking
disgusted.
for the gun, and as soon as he asked for the gun, I was like, oh, no, you better not do this. And I was getting so furious because I knew what he was going to do. And the guy really didn't need to do this. Mm-hmm. He was stabilized, and he was going to probably make it, but he had to go because Hugo is the coward. Flat out. We know this guy is a coward bully, so he takes the easy way out and he puts it, boom, and kills himself. And that, and especially because you commented on how the son's like, Dad, you're talking to me. This is the first time. That's where it really sunk in, that the dad has not spoken a word to this kid. We talked earlier how it was just that nonstop talk, and the dad was just staring at the broken TV. Mm-hmm. It really didn't completely sink into me while I was reading that the dad never said anything to him. And right there, I'm like, how many years has it been that this guy has completely ignored his son, who's sitting next to him the entire time? Right. This guy is such an SOB. And I'm so glad what happened to him. Now, Jesse doesn't feel as positive about what happened. He does feel a little responsibility. We later learn that, it's a little bit, kind of creeps him out a little bit. But it's still, we talk about extreme of this character. This is the extreme ending. We see just this, cowardly hate monger. In the end, get a little humiliation and a little, nastiness happen. Then in the end, just, ends it all. And I feel so bad for the kid because, it means more than just the kid, ranting because, he's got his wonderful nickname that he gets.
Due to his wonderful looking face.
Right. And I feel bad for him. I really wish that as this thing goes on, that something good happens to this kid.
It is funny when I'm looking at this. Now we see the angels, Aduffy, they're cast out. And, basically they become human, I'm guessing, in that particular scenario.
I took it that they went to hell. That was cast out. That's the going down to hell.
I don't want to say... Yeah, I'm going to bite my tongue on the rest of that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Now,
because I do know what becomes of them. But
okay. Well, I kind of figured this wasn't the end of them.
Yeah.
I knew that we're going to see this guy. We're going to see DeBlanc again.
Right. And I don't... Did you say LeBlanc?
DeBlanc.
Oh, I thought you said LeBlanc. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Matt LeBlanc.
Yeah, I was like, I like this hints section because it reminds me of... I'm liking in comics now. We're seeing these every so often. It pop up in certain books. Booster Gold did it. JSA did it.
JSA did it,
We've seen it in Batman and Robin, where they kind of give little hints of what's coming. But we see right here, I will have vengeance on Jesse Custer. Vengeance for the blood of my father. If I have a face like an arse, so be it. I will become arse face. And I'm just sitting here, I'm like, this is like his Batman cry.
Yeah,
for vengeance. He's like become the like a twisted version, a satire of Batman.
Yeah.
In that particular moment, which I think was an absolute riot. But we get to see little hints of people who are going to pop up later. We see what's going on in San Francisco. The Louisiana-Texas border comes up really quickly with Grandma. And then in South France with the Grail. And these are all things that play into the series later. Some of them play in throughout. And it's just an interesting way to just kind of... Then we get put into where we started. We see them go to the Five Aces Diner, and where we kicked off at the beginning of the series with them finally revealing the story. Not realizing that Tulip was already told some of the things that he revealed earlier on,
right.
Now finally to Cassidy. And just showing how these guys have gotten back together. Cassidy was gone till dawn, new shades.
A little bit of meat in his teeth, but Jesse doesn't make any comments on it because, hey, you know what? He had my back when the going got tough. He was there for me, so I'm just going to let it slide.
And I love that he's, again, got this imaginary friend that, in many ways, he's looking at us now.
Yeah.
But he was looking at his imaginary friend, and I turn around and throw it right back at him, that grin, saying, like, okay, things are kind of heading my way again. And what an interesting way for this to kind of wrap up the first 4 issues. This book, to me, is, we talked about when we did Starman. This is one of those series for me, where this is one that, when you look back, what are your top favorite series of all time. This makes that short list of just really
this is
wonderful, wonderful rides that just reread well. It's timeless. Like, this doesn't feel dated at all.
Yeah, we're reading. I'm, really pretty much reading it now, and it fits in. Even we talked about how with the plastic surgery for the kid. Mm-hmm. And I was immediately thinking, they got the technology. And I'm thinking nowadays, and you're like, no, this takes place back in the 90s. And it's not dated. The look isn't dated. There's just this great, vibe and feel to it. I thought that was kind of
Starman
a cool thing.
had that feel too,
yeah.
I thought.
There's
something about the way Opal was done where they made it kind of timeless.
Yeah.
And I was reading Starman while I was reading this. So it was just a very interesting time.
Yeah.
To read comics. There were some very edgy, interesting, unique books that were out during this era. And it's funny, when we talk about, a lot of times the 90s get flack for just having some, for many places where the 90s were just all garbage. 90s had some good books.
Yeah.
There's some books that people maybe, are like, they're like, okay, they were a little light, fodder and that type of thing. Okay, I can give you that. But the 90s, a lot of times people are forgetting some of the great books that came out in the 90s. There were books that were great that came out in the 90s. And this is a great example of one of them that really kind of turned things all over. I'm anxious to, we'll skip a week and we'll come back and do another Preacher discussion to follow up on 5 through 8. It is one of those books that, like, I will reread now 5 through 8 again just to kind of get myself fresh. And a lot of our discussion will build off of some of the points that, like, some of the things you brought up here that I hadn't thought about before, some of the things that we just kind of, it's interesting to follow this. Any of our listeners, if there's anything on this that you want to comment on or add to our discussion for our next episode, we're going to skip a week, like I said, so you've got 2 weeks to get those discussions in, but please feel free to, if you want to send an email to have it read on the show, I've already got one, send that to ragingbullets@gmail.com. or call our voicemail line, 1-440-388-4434. And I'd like to get on our next episode some voicemails relating to Preacher, or emails, either or, and get some of that in our discussion as well. This is fun.
To the Batmobile. Let's go.
Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
You're ready to move up.
I know we're both a little spent now.
Yeah,
but
a little bit tired.
I actually want to talk about one more quick little thing, and we won't make this a full-blown segment, but you and I have both been thoroughly enjoying this season of Smallville.
Oh.
And I want to periodically, whether we do informal or formal segments like this, just talk about, we just had the last episode that just aired was the Speedy episode, the introduction of Mia.
Speedy!
Yeah, and I that was one, I called you up on the phone and I said, dude, I really want to talk Smallville with you on our next show. And I knew you were a couple episodes behind. I've got to say this, for me, this is the first season of Smallville in about 3 years where I've been watching the episodes the night that they air. Unless there's some reason why I desperately can't be home. Usually, like last season, I stockpiled like 3 and 4 and I'd watch them together. But this one, I've been so into it and just so glued to the developing relationship between Clark and Lois, how Oliver Queen's played in all that, his whole drama as far as becoming a hero again and finding his way through some of the decisions he made with Lex, and just, how he's kind of hit rock bottom and who is he as a person, what is really important to him. And the manipulation he went through, the roulette episode.
Oh my God. That episode was just outstanding.
He was put through a game of life and death, where he had to make a decision whether or not, and it turns out that the whole twist of the game was not whether or not he lived or died, but whether or not he would make a decision to, at the end, he believed Roulette was the villain who put him through all this, to selflessly try and save her at the risk of his own life. And where he became in that moment the hero again that was really important to him. She brought back, and to find out who really hired Roulette.
Yeah.
Chloe.
I know. Well, she needed it. She needed to push him to the extreme. Mm-hmm. I even laughed because the one line he's like, did you have to hit me with a truck? Because it was the one scene where the car he's in gets T-boned by that truck, and I was just like, wow, this is...
But spinning out of Jimmy's death, Chloe is realizing we need better heroes.
Yeah.
We need heroes who are going to step up, so what happened to Jimmy does not happen again. She's driven by that. She's bitter by that. And this is her only way that she can deal with it, is using Watchtower, this place that Jimmy gave her, to somehow prevent what she went through with Jimmy from ever happening again. And I love how that is the ongoing theme to this whole thing. I do like how she's now helping Clark through some of his relationship issues with Lois.
Yeah.
Because before she was so adamantly against him pursuing that, and now she's kind of like, if you're going to be adopting this role as Clark Kent, if you're going to be living that life again, and Lois is someone that you truly love, you need to finally decide what do you really want and how to react to it. And that whole episode with Speedy, my favorite bit at the end was, and I didn't see it coming, was how that ended with their first kiss.
Dude, I tell you, I was like squealing like a little girl. And I was like, yay! Because it was just that great moment. Because she's like, Clark, for the first time in your life, think about what do you want.
Right.
And he just, he was just walking in. He had the strut. He had that confident, just going up to her. And she's like sitting there. And Lois is being Lois, complaining about how they lost out the TV gig to the blonde that Clark got set up with. And he just grabs her.
You know who that was? Cat Grant.
That was Cat Grant?
Yes. That was the one who got revealed on that was right in the blood.
Oh, God, that's Cat Grant.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
They lost out the TV deal to Cat Grant.
Nice. I didn't even catch that.
Yeah, that was right in the blurb. So that was a nice little.
I'm an idiot. I'm gonna have to rewatch it.
That was cool.
But I just love that plant, that kiss. That was an epic thing, and I loved Mia.
I did too.
Oh my God!
And I think she's going to.
I hope
reoccurring.
So. I hope she is. Yeah. I hope she becomes a regular. Now the cast is for TV kind of full, so I'm worried whether she's going to end up being like Bart, who was this great character who just disappeared.
She could also be what Lois was when she kicked off, though. Where they bring her in, they have her for a set number of episodes, and I don't know. It's really funny. I like that they've got this little side story going on with Green Arrow that kind of fits. And what's going on with Mercy, for example, with Zod. Yeah. Like how even though we've got this big overarching story with Clark and Lois, there are stories going on like Mercy showing Zod and really being furious by the fact that you will respect me. Because of everything she's been through in her life, and that's the great thing about her character development, she's become a character who at first I was kind of like, okay, she's Lex Luthor light.
Yeah.
Has become a very unique and interesting character in her own right. We've gotten to see what really drives her and what made her, how she's been victimized and now how she will not let anyone victimize her again. She will not let Zod ignore her. Yeah. Zod will not treat her like she's a lesser form of life. She is, she told him that I need to be your partner in all this. And Zod basically said, no human will be equal, no earthling will be equal to Kandorians. And she's proving to Zod by the fact that Zod's bodyguard was inside there, and I was just like, I knew too. Tell me when he walked through that door, I'm like, what is Mercy going to do to him?
Oh God, I knew Mercy.
I knew.
I had 10 on Mercy on that one.
I did too. Yeah.
Just because, and I loved how she did it too, because it just gives him back the bloody, dog tags.
Right.
And he's just like, she's like, I told you.
I knew that was what was in there too. That was so awesome.
No, but I tell you, the RAO Enterprises.
Yeah.
Completely missed that. Even when they said it, RAO, and then I'm like, wait, that's Zod. Raul. Oh God, of course. Mm-hmm. Outstanding.
Yeah, and that's one of the great things about how he's the president of the he's the leader of that corporation. It's so awesome. I like that there's stuff that's just continually Metallo. That episode we didn't really talk about that.
Metallo was a great episode.
Yeah, he was great as John Corbin, and I love how that was handed over to Toyman.
Yeah,
and how Toyman was going to analyze that. That became Mercy's using Toyman now, basically with his obsession.
Yeah, I was laughing my head off when she walks into the jail, and Toyman was just so underestimating her, and I was just like, dude, man, this isn't a cop. You won't be protected. And she pulls out the gun, shoots him in the leg. I'm like, outstanding.
Do you consider Mercy out and out evil?
No. Oh God, no.
She skirts that line. She skirts that line. I'm not saying
she dances.
I'm not saying she's a good person.
She goes on either side of the line, depending on she's.
But she protected Ollie there, and she really said, "You're going to leave Oliver Queen alone." But she said, "Here is, kind of your consolation prize of the moment. Tell me how this works. Tell me how to build this." So I'm curious to see. But I got to say, Brian Austin Green as Metallo did a very good job as John Corbin.
Yeah, I actually did. I wasn't too worried about that. I read a lot of stuff on the internet. Oh, I'm like, all you had to do is really see him in the Sarah Connor Chronicles, and you would see a little bit darker, a little bit more gruff kind of person. That I'm like, okay, I can. This isn't David Silver anymore. This is an actual actor who
the motivation to the character worked really well.
It was a good thing. I liked it.
Yeah. So it's just been a really interesting show so far. I like that they're bringing in more of the DC Universe into it. I like that what really works for me is it's the progression we've always wanted to see, and we're finally getting there. So, and I do, one of the reasons why I want to talk about this is, I've seen a lot of people on the forum where we've had discussions about this have said they walked away from Smallville and they haven't been enjoying it. I would love if you haven't been like last season, if I compared last season to this season, there's no comparison. Last season I was stockpiling the show. I'm very glad I watched it. I'm not going to be hypocritical and sit there and say, "Geez, I didn't like last season," because I did. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong if you didn't. If it rubbed you the wrong way, that's you. But what I'd like to say is, for people who disagree with me on last season, if you're like, "Sean, I understand you liked last season, but I didn't care for it," this season is so much better for me. This is must-watch television every week for me. I've always enjoyed Smallville. It fits. Art Lyon, actually, in one of his comments, made this comment how it fits a certain niche for him, and it always has fit that for me. Now it's jumped up to a different level, though. It doesn't just fit a certain niche in my television watching now. Now it's become must-see television. Like, this is one of, 5 programs that I've got to see every week. And I got to see it when it's on every week. I look forward to the episode. I watch the blurbs because I want to see what are they going to do next, where are they going to take us. There's a JSA 2-parter coming.
I know.
With Hawkman. I'm like, yes. It's my worry about that is, are they going to change the title of the show then after they do that? Because, fan demand. I don't know. But it's
I'm wondering if they're going to have wings. Because they
said they're going to, yeah.
There's going to be wings.
Yeah.
Okay, because they're sticking away. They're shying away from costumes, really, or they're Smallvilleizing them. They're Smallvilleizing them.
Well, and I'm sure it's going to be. Yeah. I'm sure it's going to be Smallvilleized. I don't. You know what? Do you have a problem with them Smallvilleizing things?
Not at all.
I don't either.
This is an alternate Earth, and that's how I honestly see this as.
I like that. Yeah,
an alternate Earth. This is one of the 52 universes, and I've been very vocal about I want to see him in the costume. I'm going to change that. I'm going to change that now.
I'm going to say something, though. The people behind the show have hinted at the fact that with the direction they're heading, as far as this being the growth into the adult Superman, that they haven't out and out said it, but I get the funny feeling that the edict might be lifted for the last episode.
Okay. Well, here's the thing.
I think they're really pushing. The people behind the scenes are really pushing for a 10th season because they want to lead it directly to that. I think this is a show that has interestingly grown beyond what they expected, and they were trying to figure out where to go with it and how far to go with it because it went beyond the expectations. So I think people that were saying that there were a couple seasons in there where it didn't feel like it was going as far as they wanted to go, I can understand that because maybe the show itself was trying to make a decision as far as ultimately what is their end game. Because it went beyond the number of seasons that the original edict, I think, expected.
Yeah.
Because the original producers aren't involved in it like they were before. So now they're taking it into a different direction and logically taking it where by season 10 it should go.
Now, what I was going to say is with the costume, I could actually, he's currently wearing the all black, the long black trench coat, the black shirt with the silver crest on it. I would like to see them shift it back to the red and blue colors, go back to like a longer red coat instead of a red cape, and then the blue shirt with the symbol on it, and actually have that be his Smallville Superman costume. Have it be the bright colors, and I actually would like to see that. I would not have an issue at all with it. Before I was like, man, I really like to see him open his shirt up at least once and have the full costume.
You know what? And I'm not saying you're wrong at all for this, so don't take it the wrong way. It's so funny how it didn't bother me before. Now with the way this show is going and how much more we're bringing in superheroes, and we're really playing out the fact of Clark becoming a true hero now. What he did with Ollie, those moments where he just said, where he apologized to him for not being there, how he should have been a better friend, and how he's becoming more in touch with the man than he needs to be a true hero. He's stepping outside of the restrictions Jor-El put on him and becoming his own man in his own way, making his own decisions. Those moments for me right now, I'm just making me go, whoa, I want to see it. I so want to see it now.
Well,
I want to see the last episode. That's what I want to see. Just the rip open of the shirt would be enough for me at this moment. But I am so in a different place now with this where I want to see it at the end.
Well, I still want to see it, but I would be satisfied with the other thing now.
Yeah.
Because just seeing his costume evolve and just change, and he's now wearing the symbol, but I want to get him back to the red and blue blur. I want to get back to the color splash. I love the comment that Ollie said about him. New look, huh? Yeah, you need some color. And just I was laughing because yes, he does need the color. He needs to bring it back. Just that he needs to become the big blue Boy Scout again.
Right, and I think this is going to be about getting him to that. I think this whole journey is about getting him to the point where he knows who he is as a person, who he ultimately was always destined to be. I love. Did you see the blurb for the next episode?
No.
Remember when they were showing the different Kryptonians?
Yeah.
Or the Kandorians, I should say.
Oh wait, yeah, no, I know the blurb. Yeah.
The Kryptonian that he's going to be looking for is he's found out that one of the people that were on Kandor is Jor-El.
Yeah.
So a younger obviously Jor-El before
any of this happened. So,
right.
Yeah.
So that's interesting right now because these are the Kandorians before Clark was sent to Earth.
Yeah, this is the young Jor-El. So this could be where Jor-El first learns about Krypton's fate.
Right.
So he goes back to, eventually they're going to go back to their own time. And so Zod's going to know about the fate of Krypton. Jor-El's going to know the fate of Krypton. And this is...
Do they know?
Not yet.
No, but what I'm saying is, though, how do you know that they're going to know the fate of Krypton?
This is my guess. I'm guesstimating. This is my guess.
Right.
I'm guessing that before
the
Jor-El
only person
leaves,
that can tell them, though, is
Clark. Yeah, I'm thinking Clark's going to tell Jor-El and warn him, or somehow it's going to be revealed to him, or something. I think this is the beginning of the whole... I
don't think Zod will know, though.
I think Zod will, because Zod, if you think about it, Zod, was trying to get, if you go by some of the current, Zod was trying to get people.
We saw Zod in Smallville before.
Right.
So we know Zod's ultimate fate. Zod did not know. He would completely change history with Zod in the past if he does this. He changes Smallville history then. No,
because Zod knew that Krypton was destroyed.
But that's because Zod went through it.
Right.
So
I'm just thinking, some of the comic book stories, Zod's main crime was the fact that he tried to, he stood against the council with the planet being destroyed.
Right.
So I'm thinking maybe we're going to see that type of story arc where that's what the crime that Zod is convicted of.
Okay.
That's what I'm thinking. Maybe we're going to see that. Maybe we won't. I don't know.
I don't think we're going to see. I get, and maybe, I don't know. See, is Clark going to go to Krypton? Will we see that element of it? I don't know. It's and what will he choose to save Zod, or why not? I'm anxious to see where this story arc goes, and is it going to just go this season, or is this going to go more into next season? I don't know. What do you think of the actor playing Zod?
Oh, I think he's a great actor. I think that's wonderful.
Very good casting.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, when the one internet rumor was around that the guy who played played Doomsday was going to be, he was going to be maybe play the Zod, the young Zod, and all that. I was like, that'd be kind of neat. And then when I found they weren't doing that, I was like, let's see.
I'm glad they made the choice
to go with a different actor. Yeah.
Not because I didn't like Sam Witwer. I loved Sam Witwer. I just think that almost would have diminished the role. Not because Witwer... See, like, if Witwer hadn't played Doomsday, I think he would have been great as Zod. That would have worked out well. I have no problem with that. But I think because he played Doomsday, it would have been a mistake to throw him into that same role, because it's almost better that we've got this different person. We aren't relating him to the character that we saw last season.
This is Zod.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see where that goes. It is a hard role because we're so used to seeing the Terrence Stamp version of it. It's a hard role to pull off and yet make it feel like that character.
Yeah.
Like a younger version of that character, which is interesting. This season just has me glued, and I'm looking forward to more. I want to see them make it closer and closer. I'm worried. The ones whose fate I'm really worried about is Chloe.
Yeah.
Because I so see her having a target on her.
I still see it, yeah. And I just sit back and I just hope it doesn't happen. Because this is an alternate Earth. They don't need to kill her off. She can live a normal, healthy,
I'd love
happy
to see
life.
her maybe have a reason to move outside of Metropolis if they're going to write her off this season and find a way for her to have a role somehow outside of the Smallville universe or something like that. I'd love to see them find a way to keep her stick around for season 10 just because I love the character.
Yeah.
I think she was wonderful in this. Her reaction with the, I guess her version of the calculator.
Yeah, the Oracle versus calculator fight. That was awesome, man.
Her nemesis.
Yeah.
And how she used the fingerprints. He made one fatal mistake by revealing his identity, and how she got enough dirt on him to utilize him in that. It'd be curious to see how that plays out. I'm hoping that we do get to see more of that, how he benefits them.
Well, he's now a spy inside the camp of Mercy's camp, and so that'll be interesting there.
Yeah, I think it's a great show this season. So I just one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this is because I do want to encourage people. And if you're somebody who stepped away from the show, I liked the show all along. This season I do think is stepped up enough, and I think you can jump on and it's really accessible. That if you haven't been watching it before, please give us your comments. Has this season improved for you? If you're someone who just said, the show just wore on me, I haven't been digging it, it wasn't one of those things, and I avoided this season like the plague. If you came back to it and you liked it, or even if you didn't, honestly, I'm always interested. I've got my perceptions on what I think it would be good for people, but I'm many times misread, what people like. I'm always interested in varying opinions. Feel free to post them on our forums. Feel free to email if you'd like them on the show, because Jim and I would love to follow up on a voicemail. Call us in and give us your thoughts on it, because Smallville is one of those interesting things to talk about.
Yeah.
So,
Can Batman escape? One hint, the worst is yet to come.
anyway, we'll be back, next week, Jim. Let's talk about next week.
Woohoo!
Blackest Night.
Yes.
We have a whole bunch of stuff we want to talk about, and we do want to go to the Batman Annuals and Azrael #1, but our first order of business next episode is going to be Blackest Night. If we don't get to those Batman Annuals, and we're talking about the Blackest Night and a lot of the tie-ins that are associated in it. The Titans tie-in we have to talk about, because there was, to me, a very interesting clue in that. That's what the tie-ins have been for me, and I want to talk about those.
They're given
clues.
pieces, yeah.
So that's going to be our main feature next episode. We may get to things like Azrael and the Annuals. It all depends on how long our Blackest Night discussion is. Then we're back the following week to Preacher on a bi-weekly schedule. So Anyway, Jim, our sponsors for this episode are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com, where you can pick up from DCBService.com The Losers Volume 1 and 2, regularly $19.99, 50% off, only $9.99, and that's not a piece. It looks like that's a package deal. That's issues 1 through 12 of that series for $9.99. That's a must-grab if you're interested in it. It's Andy Diggle and Jock, and Jock's artwork's great. It sounds like a cool series. So, The Preacher over at InStockTrades.com, The Preacher Dead or Alive, the collected covers. You can get this, if you like the Glenn Fabry covers, with text by Garth Ennis and Glenn Fabry. You can pick this up. It's regularly $29.95. The hardcover's only $18.87. Or if you want to get a cheaper softcover version just because you want to have it and look at it, regularly $19.95 for that. 37% off, only $12.57. That's InStockTrades.com. So I want to thank DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com for continuing to support us. I want to congratulate again our contest winners. All 6 of you, thank you very much for participating. And, of course, our grand prize winner, Eli. I want to congratulate Kent Hare and see what book he's going to be picking out from us for In Stock Trades. We will see everyone next week.
Bye.